I replaced every dinosaur in ARK with Kaiju. So every dodo is now a leatherback, every Quetzal is King Ghidorah, and every Giga is named Doug. What kind of name is Doug? 53 species of Kaiju have taken over the ARK, and I have 100 days to defeat or tame every single one, while Kaiju are spawning literally everywhere. And I added 3 Kaiju boss fights too. So without further ado, I present to you the most times ARK has ever crashed in 100 days. On day 1, I woke up on an island, and 3 seconds later, I got decapitated. Good times. The dinosaurs have gone extinct, and I think I know why. Everywhere was covered in degenerates. But after Frosty the Snowman gave me hypothermia, I reincarnated in the southeast, and my new neighbors consisted of King Kong, a giant pair of wings, and AI that went too far. Is that Cherno Alpha? These guys actually seemed friendly, but I used that term kinda loosely, so I took this opportunity to punch a tree like a man, while Harambe's father-in-law stared into my soul. But then, when I turned around, this happened. The sounds of death were echoing across the island, so I tried to ignore that. Is that Godzilla? And focus on getting some resources, which consisted of kidnapping Rockwell Jr., turning him into a pickaxe, using said pickaxe to physically assault Rockwell himself until he gave me some flint, unlocking some things inside my brain, knowledge, and crafting a hatchet. But day 1 was already coming to an end, and I needed to leave the safe area. This is where everything went wrong. So on day 2, after brutally eviscerating Mr. Cactus to quench my thirst, I saw a behemoth who was allegedly the legendary beast of Monster Island. Wait, is he coming for me? And since there are no dinosaurs on this entire planet, everything is gonna aggro me from super far away. And this man clearly wants to murder me, so I started heading down towards the crystals below, where I spotted a pile of garbage the size of Mount Everest. Bros built like the molded from Resident Evil 7, along with 3 very large health bars from something called a Shimo. I don't even want to know what that is. My plan was to make it down to the water and craft a raft, because the spawn rates were only going to increase, and I wanted to put some distance between me and the oversized heathens. But once I made it down, there was an alien looking dude on my right, and on my left, well, this guy. Sword welder? What is a sword welder? Oh no. I perished. I really needed to tame my first kaiju if I was ever gonna survive this place. Excuse me, sir, but I can't even spawn in without being sentenced to a public execution. So I spent the rest of day 2 being physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and theoretically assaulted. But on day 3, I found a Sasurasu in the redwoods. Did I pronounce that right? And at this point, I consider anyone who didn't impale me on sight to be my best friend, to be honest. But I kept hearing this awful noise that sounds like a race car revving up and then exploding intergalactically. Okay then. And I realized that without dinosaurs in this world, the kaiju are actually fighting each other. But luckily, I was safe. Or so I thought. So I did the normal ARK stuff. And it was time to come up with a plan. With no dinosaurs, my only source of hide early game, which I need for a raft and a bed, is from supply drops. And I got super lucky with some sleeping bags over in this white one. But it didn't last long, because my new neighbor was a robot, and he wanted to play laser tag. Oh no! I tried to run from the Star Trek cosplayer, but once again, I got deleted. The redwoods did seem kinda safe though, depending on your definition of safe. But before I could attempt to tame my first kaiju, I needed a spyglass. So I started beefing with a mineral, and it was giving me everything but crystal. But in order for me to make the awesome spyglass, I need 10 hide. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. Well, I have to kill a kaiju. It was only day 3, and I was already getting super frustrated because the weakest kaiju still have over 10,000 health and can easily one-shot me. But the worst part was I can't make a bed. So if I make a base and then I die, it's gone. But I had an idea. What if I kite this Roomba with legs over to the giant scorpion from Ohio, and I almost perished in the process, but somehow, after some Mortal Kombat related activities, the Exo Jaeger was down, and I stole his core memories. These are actually used to craft a tameable robotics major, but there's no possible way I can afford that right now. Anyways, I didn't get any hide from that, but the concept was definitely worth trying again. So after getting my stuff back, I continued east. And by the way, these party dodos, they're not supposed to be here. I didn't use them for hide, and I removed them from the code very shortly after. But anyways, my prayers to the ARK gods for a kaiju body were answered. I just needed to somehow get to it. But as soon as I started heading over, World War III began. And to make matters worse, Lucifer himself made an appearance. Oh my. I was in a bit over my head, and despite cowering in fear behind this rock, well, what? I was removed from the premises. But out of the 53 kaiju in this mod, they all have two things in common. One, they want to digest me, and two, I don't have any of them yet. I really needed the game to just give me a free handout, and I know just where to get one. In Raid Shadow Legends. Raid's giving away so much free stuff that I thought I was a live guest on Oprah. And if you're a new player, in about 60 seconds, you're gonna get 2 epics and a legendary for completely free when using my link and promo code. And everyone can get a second legendary, Leminisi the Gold-wing, by just logging into the game for 7 days between now and August 20th. And if you log in for another 7 days, you'll get some exclusive gear to make her even stronger. Just make sure to start before July 31st so you have enough time to qualify. But one of my favorite factions in all of Raid is the Barbarians, because they look super, well, barbaric. But the faction is versatile and has some of my favorite champions, like Scylla of the Drakes, Thor, and even Odin. And then there's Armand the Magnificent. We have a love-hate relationship. At least he looks like Johnny Depp. So download Raid today using the QR code on screen or the link in the description below, and you'll immediately get a huge starter pack and the epic Grizzled Jarl. He's a dwarf, and he's got a sleeper build. And when you hit level 15, you're gonna get Mausoleum Mage. I still have him on my team for support even later into the game. And if you're a new player, there's 4 entire promo codes that you can choose from. Green Warden Ruark, Alice the Wanderer, Tuhanarak, and Tholen Foulbeard. You can only use 1 new player code though, and I'd recommend choosing Tuhanarak since Void Legendaries are super rare to come by, and she's a great support. If you want damage though, Tholen Foulbeard would probably be your guy. And once you're in, come find me under the clan Justifies Jungle. Everyone is welcome to join, and we even have Harambe's father as our mascot. So don't forget to download using the QR code on screen or the link in the description below, and thank you to Raid for sponsoring today's video. My KD ratio at this point was 0 and 20, and I kept spawning all the way in Narnia. Why am I all the way over here? Things were not looking great, and eventually I gave up on getting my stuff back. But I had a plan, and I wasn't ready to give up just yet. On day 4, I spawned on the very edge of the map, and I found a white supply drop. There was a giant piece of broccoli to my left, and whatever that thing is, I don't like the way you're looking at me, bro. But this white supply drop had a bed inside, and this simple little bed gave me the hope that I needed to continue on. I just needed to figure out where I'm gonna place it. I was also just now realizing that I'm gonna have to somehow make thousands of narcotics to knock these sociopaths unconscious. And with no dinosaurs to farm berries for me, and no kaiju because they prefer murder, my plan was to build the world's largest greenhouse and just grow all of the narcotics myself. Anyways, this other white drop gave me some cloth armor. Yeah, that'll totally stop me from being one-shotted. And even though I was somewhat safe in my little corner of the map, I needed to make my way towards the center before the kaiju spawns completely take over. Wow, thanks, bro. And my plan was to either keep finding supply drops until I had the hide for a raft, or to find a cave where I can set up a base. I also should tame a flyer kaiju whenever I can. But then, on the next island, this happened. Oh, the salmon were ARK survival evolving, and that man was spamming tsunamis in my backyard. Ow! But long story short, I didn't find any good drops. But I had a new plan. I was hugging the side of the map, which had less kaiju, and I had one destination, the Redwoods Cave. I wasn't expecting to actually get my stuff back, but here we are. And the dude that sent me into a coma earlier, well, it was ready for harvest. This was my chance. But then Colossalus showed up. This man forgot his skin at home, and he wasn't very happy about it. Bro's playing Mortal Kombat with the devil. I wasn't really feeling it, you know, I wasn't in the mood to die today. So I decided not to risk it, and I continued for the honey cave. It's at 3030 on the map, right around where that Gojuran is being a menace to Redwood society. Bro, can you shut up? But somehow, I made it. And I know it's not much, but this cave would be my safe haven from the planet-sized degenerates of this world. Ha. Y'all are too fat to enter my house. As I entered the cave, the honey was sticking to my cloth boots and my movement speed was now limited to a brisk walk. But there's no possible way you're catching me building a house when my neighbors sound like this 24/7. So I decided to build down here by the water, where it's a bit more peaceful. What are you doing here? I didn't exactly have the budget to buy a door, or walls, or a roof, but I had a bed, and it'll work for now. That'll keep him out. I also placed down some storage boxes for my life savings, and just like that, day 5 was coming to an end. And it was now day 6. But before I could even decide on what we're gonna do today, the primordial Sasorisu was literally drowning inside my bathtub. Bro either forgot how to breathe, wanted to end it all, or maybe he just read that sign I placed earlier and wanted to be respectful. Either way, that brother gone. At the time, I thought this was too good to be true. I mean, you gotta love it when you order DoorDash and the DoorDasher drowns in your bathtub, get some free hide with your meal. But as it turns out, it was in fact too good to be true. Because when I skinned the DoorDasher's body, it didn't give me any hide. I low-key perished in the process, but the only real useful thing from that was this Kaiju G-Cell, which is used to tame some of the Kaiju. But anyways, the honey cave was home to a large variety of resources, including honey and organic polymer. Yeah, that's about it. Honey is actually an unlimited supply of food for me in here though, but I can't put it on my hotbar because instead of eating it, I'll just yeet it on the floor. I was heading back to the surface though, because my plan was to get some metal tools and start farming narco berries to tame my first kaiju. But then I witnessed WWE Raw in my honey-filled living room. Siren Head himself was very alarmed, and the Gigamyth low-key didn't stand a chance. At this point, I was already on my second bag of popcorn, but then I realized, wait, these guys spawned inside my cave. This would certainly not do. And to make matters worse, is that the Demogorgon from Stranger Things? Luckily, he was super slow because of the honey spill, but I needed to block every single spawn point inside my living room. So I managed to sneak outside without alerting the authorities. What is that? Did it hurt when you fell from heaven? And before I could make some narco berries, I needed to get a forge going for some metal. The Titanium Monarch Dragon Queen thing wasn't attempting to mutilate me, so I continued to chop up the entire family lineage of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and it was time to make that refining forge. Or so I thought. Oh, I forgot about that. I still didn't have a single piece of hide. And if I want to craft basically anything, I'm gonna have to skin someone. So I kited Mr. Demogorgon over to this ledge. Ow, what the? When a Terminant Queen broke both of my kneecaps. I don't know how I'm still alive right now, but that's definitely how I'm gonna find some chitin later. Anyways, I managed to loop back around, head into my cave while severely dehydrated, and all the way back down, I saw a low-health Fenrir in the distance. He passed away shortly after, but we must have been related or something because he gave me some inheritance. 7 arrows and some lore. Thanks, man. The arrows did give me an idea though. I could always craft like 500 of them and then shoot them into Siren Head's eye socket. But before I could even worry about hide, I had to protect my humble abode from heathen spawning within. Hi there. In a normal playthrough, these foundations would stop kaiju from spawning inside my cave. And I'll talk more about this later, but it didn't prevent the kaiju from spawning in the cave. But after spending my entire life savings to craft 50 stone arrows with the sole purpose of launching them into a Siren Head man's kidney, I needed to craft a couple hundred more. But on the way up my honey-filled staircase, ARK need the skin crawler has been summoned. She's inside my living room, isn't she? I was being stream sniped, literally. What do I do? Clearly, the foundations were not blocking the spawns, and this might be because I placed the spawns everywhere on the map, like I manually placed them. I was just now realizing how bad that actually was. The Broodmother's mother was not giving up, and I tried to kite her down into the water. I watched helplessly as she poisoned my water supply, burned my retinas, and gave birth to a psychopath. Aw, he's kinda cute. Good times. I revitalized in my bedroom, hoping that the little spider would devitalize, but once again, I was sentenced to 5 minutes in the afterlife, and approximately 5 minutes later, I reincarnated once again. And this time, I managed to actually get my stuff back. Oh, why is he so fast? Luckily for me, the Broodmother's mother-in-law was stuck inside the water. 55 damage. Oh no. Shooting my mortal enemy made her give birth to an entire mafia of Cretan children, turning my humble abode from bed, bath, and beyond into bloodbath and beyond. I'm pretty confident that I could take her out with these arrows, but it would take a few business days. I was assuming that her health was somewhere around 50k, maybe more. I mean, I'm not really sure because I don't have a spyglass yet, but I did know one thing. There's no way I can go back down there. So I spent the rest of day 7 working an overtime shift, which consisted of lumberjack from 6 to 9, working in the mines from 9 to 5, and becoming one with the bushes from 5 until further notice. And on day 8, I queued up 500 stone projectile. This might take a while. Trying to walk while you're crafting is slow enough, but doing that while also walking through the honey cave, it's something that I wouldn't wish upon my mortal enemy. But speaking of my mortal enemy, as I was heading to the other entrance, I heard the sounds of a good time. Well, somebody just got decapitated. I don't know what's going on out there, and I'm not sure that I want to. But if I don't find any hide, I can't really do anything. So I headed out, trying not to aggro the ant farm from Ohio, when someone started playing with their nuclear missiles. What is that, bro? Siren Head appeared, literally on fire from the explosion. And bro just started beefing with an ant colony like he wasn't burning alive right now. But with him low health like this, it might be my chance. He looks a tad bit bloody, and these guys still have insane health, but nothing like some of the kaiju with 50 million. So I started shooting, and bro was too tall to enter my residence. What a loser. But then, this happened. Cracked Siren Head. Does that mean he's on crack? Luckily, when I made it back from the afterlife, it looked like the Broodmother's mother-in-law tried to chase me out and is in too deep right now. I don't think she can actually drown. I don't think she has an oxygen meter, but she also can't swim, and I think we're gonna be all right. I do need to figure out some way to stop these dudes from getting in here, but that's a problem for another day. Because as I made my way to the surface, a NASCAR driver was spontaneously combusting. But the Siren Head wasn't actually a victim. That man's the one that caused the explosion. Siren Head exposed? So yeah, he's not actually bloody, he's just explosive. So I tried again, but he just ran away. And then I broke my leg from being too hot. And then he started coming back. Oh no. Long story short, bro casually drop kicked me for 8 trillion damage. And the rest of the day consisted of a robotic heathen spawning out of thin air with the sole life purpose of disemboweling me. Witnessing Callisto get absolutely melted by who knows what, Mr. Owl. And this. What is that? Things were looking pretty bad. And with the bet on cooldown, I spawned in next to the entire cast of How to Train Your Dragon. But I'll be honest, at this point, I was seriously starting to lose hope. The spawn rates were already getting kind of out of hand, and I didn't have a single piece of hide. And taming a kaiju without the help of dinosaurs seemed downright impossible. I was heavily considering quitting this challenge and trying a different one instead. But after Mecha Godzilla jumped higher than Usain Bolt, shot a laser from his mouth directly at my eyebrows,
I said, you and your eyebrows,
and put a mere mortal in a spin cycle, I spawned over in the south, and I found something that convinced me to give this whole thing one more shot. This purple supply drop gave me some ghillie pantalones. 5 seconds later, a giant broccoli summoned an army of vegan Quetzals and then murdered me. But that's not the point. I realized that I really shouldn't be at my base right now, because if I just keep respawning and keep getting pulverized by degenerates, eventually I'll either get a good supply drop or I'll find someone's oversized corpse for high. And it might take a while, but it's definitely worth a shot. I can't wait to get my medium crop plot blueprint. It was now day 12, and after Callisto drowned in my underground hot tub, my backpack was still here. I somehow made it back to base, and I'm not even going to question what's going on over there. But I didn't care about that, because I have 57 hide and a mortar and pestle. Victory! Wow, saying that out loud, it sounds kind of depressing that I'm excited about that. And by the way, whoever coded these supply drops to give me a singular blueprint for a metal door, look man, I just want to talk, alright? No, but seriously, what is wrong with you? I knew that this challenge would be pretty difficult without dinosaurs to farm trank arrows and nothing to kill for high. But what I didn't account for, however, is not having something as basic as a pteranodon. I can't even get around the map and stay away from the degenerates, which is probably the worst part of this entire challenge. I needed to tame a flyer kaiju ASAP, probably either Mothra or Rodan, but 57 hide is still kinda pathetic. So even though these sleeping bags are super useful, I decided to demolish them for high, which brings our total to 81. I need to make a crossbow and a Tranks plus mortar and pestle before I can start taming stuff, but the number one priority is the Awesome Spyglass. There goes 10 hide, because it's like a normal spyglass, but awesome. It lets me see the health and the torpor levels of kaiju, so now I know how many arrows I need to incapacitate my neighbors. I wish I had one of those in real life. And with the remaining 71 hide, I decided I should probably do the boring thing and just make a refining forge. It's gonna take basically all of my hide, but it'll allow me to cook up some metal. So I committed the felony of mining a crystal with a hatchet for some stone when Colossalus himself decimated a black-blooded mortal. Ooh. The body was still fresh, and I kinda wanted to try and go for the hide. So I dropped off all of my gear except for a stone hatchet, you know, in case I get disintegrated, and I began to crip walk over. The honey slowdown is so annoying. But as I approached, does that say 41 billion torpor? Colossalus was too tall to fit inside my cave, which is probably why the body hasn't been consumed by this man. But unfortunately, and it's giving me oil. When I started this challenge, I just kind of assumed that the kaiju would have hide on their body, but I've yet to find one that actually does. And to make matters worse, my game crashed. Good times. So on day 13, after I finished extorting some stone from a green giant, I crafted the refining forge and cooked up some metal.
Someone cooked here.
But I was now all the way back to square one. I needed 20 hide for a smithy before I could do anything. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I was going. And as I left the cave, I came face to face with the Broodmother's 8-legged mother-in-law. Not again. She has 20,000 health, but she definitely doesn't drop hide, so I tricked her into going for a swim. But her overweight stepchildren were all still on the ledge. I tried to lodge an arrow into their spinal cords to get their attention, but I needed to get a bit closer, and that's where I messed up. When I awoke the next morning inside my bed, I survived for approximately 15 seconds, but I did manage to kite them into the water. And while my bed was on cooldown, I did some exploration nearby. And that, my friends, is where I found Wukong, the apocalyptic dragon trying to steal my spotlight. He's not even supposed to spawn in the redwoods because I made all of the kaiju spawns biome specific because I was trying to make it like more of a theme type of thing. I don't know, they're just spawning everywhere. Anyways, the bed was ready. So after getting my custom made flak gauntlets back, bro never skips wrist day, I headed up and I found Mothra herself. Ooh. She has 600,000 health and 150,000 torpor. But that's not the interesting part. She's also a pacifist. I mean passive tame. But the Mothra snack taming food requires me to be level 98. And the crafting requirements are probably insane anyways. But this Sasorisu on the other hand, well, he only wanted dead kaiju G-cells. Being a cannibal in 2025 is crazy. I did have some of those dead ones from Ragnarona that Colossalus drop-kicked into the Shadow Realm earlier, but I only had 3. So I shoved an entire rotting carcass down the esophagus of a scorpion, and he was so traumatized from this lunch that we sat here for 20 entire minutes and the dude still didn't want dessert. The G-cells were probably gonna spoil at this rate, and when I went AFK for literally 20 seconds, I came back to this. Dude, really? See, this is why we can't have nice things. And when I made it back over, this siren-headed man killed my Sasorisu. He also killed me. And so did the hostages in my basement 10 seconds later. So I decided to look for some supply drops in the meantime, over by the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but that didn't go too well either. And when I was finally able to spawn back, Siren Head was over there standing over my bag like a freak. Wait, he's not murdering me. Siren Head was stuck. I really wanted to eviscerate this man, but he has 82,000 health, and my arrows do exactly 55. And according to my calculations, this will take 1,500 arrows straight into those mangy looking fingers he has. But I also had a pike, which also does 44 damage to his fingernails. And maybe I'm just delusional or something. I know 99% of people wouldn't even attempt this, but I think he might drop hide, and I gotta try. This might take a while. And hindsight 2020, this was definitely not the best use of my time, but the sunk cost fallacy got me, bro. I was too deep in. At this point, this man's gnarly looking pinky finger was my #1 goal in life. I was trying to find some type of weapon that didn't require hide, because the pike was pretty good, but the bow is definitely my best bet. And after launching 100 more arrows in between that man's sandy cheeks, I realized that this would probably take 2 entire days. Yeah, it wasn't worth it. If I could use the pike the entire time, it honestly wouldn't be a problem, but I needed to conserve my hide, and I decided to quit while I was still ahead. Anyways, outside, I saw King Kong. He was healthy as ever, but the torpor was only 3k. Wait, really? I don't know why, but they made like every kaiju in existence except for King Kong, so I added this one just because, you know, gotta catch them all. But this means it wouldn't take very many shots. I just needed to lace those shots with NyQuil. So I became a humble narco berry farmer, and I was actually gonna start growing some inside my cave. Hey, how's it going, dude? But once I made it back down, the Broodmother's mother-in-law somehow had fallen, but could get up, and she was living rent-free. I tried to get her attention and kite her back into my hot tub, but then, out of nowhere, Mothra jumped in front of the arrow, got mad that I shot her, and removed my kidneys. Can you just go away, bro? Nope. The Broodmother stepchildren were trying to break down my front door, so I waited patiently as the 8-legged miscreants continued with their criminal activities until I saw an opening. I managed to kite them all into the water, and Mothra was over here getting webbed, but for some reason doesn't fight the other dudes, just kills me. But 5 minutes later, after my bed allowed me to reincarnate, I regret to inform you that the situation has not improved. I tried to find something to help me get out of this situation, but I only had about 18 hardcore drugs and 22 metal ingots at my disposal. I tried to make a run for it, but yeah, I got deleted. The Redwoods mainly contains bugs, titans, King Kongs, and Siren heads, which is way easier than the other biomes, which contain the big boys. But I managed to come back up behind the cave, where I watched King Kong's public execution for the crime of being related to Harambe, and I managed to aggro Siren head right after the kill. He didn't harvest the body, and it was right there for the taking. But I didn't make it back in time. So on day 16, I decided to go for supply drops just outside the Redwoods. The green ones are probably my best bet for getting hide, but I saw a yellow one over by the snow. But then my entire focus shifted when I saw this. Fenrir was busy getting absolutely eviscerated. And if a giant wolf doesn't give hide, then I don't know what will. And I almost got arrested by an Amber Alert in the process. But when I arrived, I couldn't believe my eyes. Fenrir was beefing with Godzilla, of all people. But not the regular, powerful Godzilla. This one is from 1954. So not only is he old and decrepit, but he's also a lot smaller with a lot less health and a lot less abilities. He still has 800k health though, which is definitely more than I have. But anyways, Fenrir got absolutely destroyed by that old man, and I managed to distract the boomer before he harvested the body. This could finally be my chance. The red outline from my spyglass told me that he was aggroed on me, but the dude wasn't moving away from his victim. I think he was like stuck on top of the body or something. I mean, we are playing Ark after all. But then again, maybe he just wants to troll me. I was hoping though, if he is stuck, then he won't be able to attack me. But it is pretty risky. So just in case I die today, I put all of my gear that I don't want to lose into a storage box, made a backup hatchet, and slowly evaluated my life decisions. As I crip walked over, Mr. Godzilla, who was born in 1954, began scratching his head. And he was clearly stuck, or maybe he just has dementia, because he wasn't trying to murder me. Beware of ice and bacteria. Thanks for the advice. I made it, and I'm not even gonna question why this man hasn't removed my legs yet, but I had one focus: skinning a wolfman. But 10 minutes and 7 stone hatches later, oh no, not like this. I don't know how I was still alive, but I'm glad this game is glitchy for once. Oh, that man is stuck. On the way back out, I used my spyglass on some residents of the area. And today I learned that Goliath here is a passive tame, but he requires enhanced or evolved Kaiju G-cells. The ones I harvested from Fenrir are the standard dead Kaiju G-cells, and I would have to upgrade those first before I could tame any bigger creatures. But anyways, I spent the rest of day 16 consuming over 600 Tento berries to simply not dehydrate. And as the sun rose on day 17, I made it back to my humble hive-like abode. I was examining this poor soul who needed medical attention when this happened. What? These videos take a lot of time and inflict maximum emotional damage. So if you're enjoying it, and or if you're a professional whimsical skedaddler,
I don't think you understand the heritage and athleticism it takes to be a professional whimsical skedaddler.
please consider subscribing. We're getting really close to 200k, and I need your help to make it happen.
And some of you say white people don't have any culture. Then what is this?
3 seconds later, Rodan himself was launching nukes across the entire tri-state area, but this man named Rodan here, next to Mothra, is one of the only flying kaiju in this mod. And apparently he's a passive tame, but I find that kind of hard to believe. Anyways, I don't know how I'm getting out of my front door, but I'll worry about that later, because right now, while listening to the sounds of intergalactic warfare, I was back, and I had secured almost 400 hide from that heist. I needed to be very frugal in how I spent it though, because I didn't know where I would be getting more. I'm actually over here living paycheck to paycheck in a video game. But one thing was for sure, I needed a smithy, so I crafted one, and then my game crashed. Good times. So I ran back down to my base while listening to the sounds of madness, crafted yet another smithy, demolished my old wood storage box, and transferred my life savings to my brand new bank account. I now had exactly 369 hide, and I needed to make a budget. Crossbows actually don't require hide. For some reason, I was thinking they did, but this is honestly a huge relief. But regular metal tools cost 10 hide each. Can't even escape inflation in a prehistoric video game. I decided to craft them because I'll get more hide from a body if I have a metal hatchet, and I also need the pickaxe for metal, but I wasn't too happy about that. And I also unlocked the Tranks plus mortar and pestle, which is basically like a normal mortar and pestle, aka a drug lab, except you like scaled it up and now you're a giant drug manufacturer. It combines trank arrows into like 10, 50, 500 times nighttime arrow dart things. And I kinda need these because some of the kaiju legitimately have billions of torpor with a B. Anyways, after expenses, I had about 334 hide left. And I would love to make some flak armor, but I can't afford luxury Gucci clothing right now, and kaiju will probably one-shot me anyways. So I decided to save that and focus on making enough narcotics to tame my first kaiju. If someone has 500,000 torpor, it'll take somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 narcotics to knock them out, with a crossbow anyway. Oh! And what I was saying, before I was so rudely interrupted, is that I know my biceps are massive, but I can't farm 20,000 narco berries by hand. So my plan was to get some narco berry seeds, start my brand new narco berry farm, and upscale it until I'm the CEO of the #1 narcotics business in the West. But before I could make any crop plots, well, I'm in a bit of a situation. I can't go back to my house because there's a murderous Berenstein bear over there, and I can't leave the cave because of the terminant blocking the entrance. That's not even a kaiju, it's just a normal ant from Australia. Anyways, I ran back to base to grab my arrows because she does only have 18,000 health, and headshots do 90 each with a crossbow. But unfortunately, I just couldn't find the right angle to consistently hit her without getting too close. And that's when the light bulb went off. Wait. What if I just drown her? It took a bit of experimentation, but when I made it over to this ledge on the side, her head seemed to be under the water. Oh yeah, she's definitely getting waterboarded right now. I wasn't 100% sure if it was working, and these kaiju have iron lungs or something with insanely high oxygen stats, but I just sat there for the entire rest of day 17, and at the start of day 18, it happened. Let's go. So after celebrating the death of my waterlogged neighbor, I decided to check if she drops some hide. Her lifeless corpse sunk down pretty far into my bathtub, and by the time I reached it, I was already about to have the same fate that she did. But honestly, I didn't even care, because Callisto has skin too, which is quite rare in the kaiju world. So I just sat here, water filling my lungs, repeatedly smacking the booty of a home invader. And more importantly, while hide filled my inventory, it was a glorious sight to behold. But all good things must come to an end, including me. And when I returned from the afterlife, I relived my glory days of skinning a waterlogged degenerate, and then I perished. Again. It kinda sucks that I have to sit here and wait on the bed cooldown each time, but I think it's 100% worth it for the hide. So after writing myself another underwater death note, I was about to do it again, but the body had decayed already. So I chose to stop torturing my lungs and swam back to the surface when I heard this. Something was exterminating my pet ant from Australia. So I put up all of my gear and I decided to go investigate. I didn't see anything up here at first, but my expert detective skills told me that some robotic looking dude probably executed Mr. Terminant for exceeding the recommended BMI of an insect. And then Goju ran up there above my head, who's a little bit damaged, aren't we all? Shot his race car sounding laser beam through that hole in the roof to avenge Mr. Terminant. Anyways, back at my 1-bedroom apartment, I now had a pretty significant amount of hide from Fenrir and Callisto, and it was time to work on the narco berry business. So I crafted 5 of the largest crop plots available with my bare hands, learned how to make compost inside my brain, and made 3 entire trash cans dedicated to fertilizing my crops. Crops do grow a lot faster in this game if you build a greenhouse, but greenhouses require cementing paste, and beavers don't exist. So the only way to get cementing paste for me is by crafting it. Yikes. So I decided to just build the greenhouse out of stone for now, because I don't really have the luxury of making things look cool when there's heathens everywhere. And I headed up to the entrance to farm some more wood and stone. I went to the other entrance to farm wood and stone, and everything was pretty calm out here. Or so I thought. But as I began karate chopping a tree, this happened. Bro, he just spawned in front of me. No, please stay over there. See, this is why I don't leave my house. When I ARK survival ascended from my cave yet again, there were now some demogorgons from Stranger Things chilling in the lobby, and Mr. Ragnarona, the black-blooded degenerate, was blocking the cave entrance like a weirdo. I didn't really know what to do, and I had to get my stuff back before I could start this narcotic farm. So I decided to fetch my Siren-headed security guard from the backyard, proceeded to watch as he picked up a demogorgon, placed it into his esophagus, and ate that man in one bite. That was kind of impressive. But after patiently waiting for him to finish digesting his meal, I guided him over to the home invader. I perished, of course, but when I returned, the Mortal Kombat had commenced. And 2 minutes later, Siren Head got sent to the Siren Shadow Realm. I wasn't about to wait on this man to leave, so I decided to just loop all the way around the cave, which took like 5 minutes, and eventually I made it back. 150,000 torpor. I proceeded to spend the night of day 19 role-playing as a lumberjack, wearing gloves, only gloves, ghost riding some Metallica, and farming so many rocks that they began to fear my presence. Bro is trying to run away. On day 20, after wasting a bunch of arrows sniping at a beehive because I wanted to see if there was a kaiju inside, I'll come back later, I spent the entire rest of the day circling around back to the honey cave and spamming Y on my controller approximately 37 quintillion times to get a total of 12 narcoberry seeds. Nice. So I crafted some foundations, ceilings, and a double door frame with my bare hands yet again, and I was all out of stone already. By the way, I'm making this out of Stone Age materials right now because it's all I can afford, to be honest, but I am going to be using greenhouse structures later when I get some pace. And speaking of being poor, I don't even have the stone for this, so I repaired my hatchet, started heading back up. Never mind, I started heading back down. Fenrir just passed away. My condolences. And I came back down because I was gonna grab my crossbow to shoot at an ant, because that's what we do over here in Ohio. But it turns out that it wasn't necessary, because they don't attack when the queen isn't around. Slacking on the job, eh? What is that? But now that I was finally able to touch grass, it was time to finish that greenhouse. Or, stone house, I guess. So I can cook up some hardcore drugs and brainwash my first kaiju. Welcome to my humble abode. Well, I don't live here, but you know what I mean. I was low-key thinking that 6 crop plots probably isn't going to be enough, so making this second floor here allows me to have like 15 total. But without Reese's feces in this world, I'm going to need a whole lot of poop to fill these compost bins. What the actual... I'm not even surprised anymore. My narcoberry seeds were spoiling fast, and so was the day counter. I needed that fertilizer like yesterday if I wanted to take out all of the kaiju by day 100. So I decided to speed up the process a bit and craft a throne. Toilets can create 1 fertilizer per royal dump, but the issue is I needed 200 cementing paste, and I don't have any chitin. So I grabbed some arrows, about 416 of them things to be exact, the lifetime supply of honey that I've been eating exclusively for the last 5 days, and went out searching for the giant fire ant. It seems Woodalong the apocalyptic dragon was done terrorizing my local neighborhood and has finally moved on with his life. Bye, have a great time. Good luck with the apocalypse or whatever. But I couldn't find the Terminate, and that was because Mr. Woodalong eviscerated that man. Wait, is that him? I normally don't have the best luck, but this was actually so perfect. I really needed chitin, and an ant the size of that dude from my 600-pound life gets delivered to my mailbox. But I think he was like possessed or something, because bro's body learned how to fly. Get back here, young man. Terminants give a lot of chitin, And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. It wasn't even lunchtime, and I already had 1,000 pieces of exoskeleton from a generous donor. And the chitin combined with 1,600 stone at exactly a 2-1 ratio, I had my 200 cementing paste. That stuff is insanely expensive when you actually have to craft it. Anyways, I finally made myself a throne worthy enough for the gifts I'm going to give it every morning, and I spent the rest of my stone on some more paste to make metal irrigation. Mainly because I kind of figured that some random degenerate is going to spawn inside my house and break them at some point. It's way too dark in here. I decided to make this wooden throne the centerpiece of my greenhouse, but I just couldn't test it out yet because I wasn't prepared enough for glory. So I ran in circles and ate like 5,000 calories worth of honey, sat down, and let one rip. When you flush the toilet, you immediately get 1 fertilizer. So I went ahead and planted the first narco berry crop using my byproduct, and this is officially my brand new drug lab.
I used to do drugs, I still do, but I used to too.
But it was already day 24, and I can't really progress in this challenge until I actually tame a kaiju. So I decided that the best use of my time was putting my digestive system through some factory farming until I had enough fertilizer for the greenhouse. A lot of honey was consumed that day. I can't believe I just did that for 30 minutes. On day 25, I had 21 fertilizer made, organically, because I wanted to have at least 2 for each crop plot so they don't run out for a bit. But I realized that I only have 5 more narcoberry seeds. So I planted 4 entire drug trees, chopped down an aquatic crystal for some stone, made another drug plant. Wait, how is this irrigated? You're telling me that the water is traveling vertically through a stone ceiling? Fair enough. Anyways, I already had over 1,000 narcoberries from trying to farm the seeds earlier, but I couldn't get any narcotics going because I don't have spoiled meat. But I knew one way to fix this problem. Step 1 is place 400 entire ribeye steaks inside my wooden toilet. Step 2, sit down. And step 3, do the deed. And now they're still ribeye steaks, but disgusting. I also took the poop out instead of flushing by accident, and now I can't turn it into fertilizer, but the spoiled meat allowed me to queue up 290 buckets of raw NyQuil, and just like that, we were back to the bottleneck being narcoberries, which is currently solving itself as we speak. So while my little drug babies were busy becoming full-grown drug manufacturing men, I decided to go for a walk, where I discovered that a murderous psychopath lives on top of my cave-side apartment, and a black-blooded cretin lives next door. I need some new neighbors. Also, I've noticed that even though some of the kaiju render in from all the way across the universe, a lot of the kaiju, like this Ragnarona, render in from like 20 foot away, which is kind of terrifying because that means there's probably a whole lot more kaiju than I can see, and they're just right there and I can't see them. Anyways, while I was waiting on my narcos to bury, I spent the rest of day 25, crashing, apparently, farming some more stone for crop plots, and yet again, picking so many bushes for narcoberry seeds that I may or may not have just broken the Y button on my controller. Day 26 was upon us, and so was an apocalyptic dragon named Wukong. 10 billion torpor, huh? And you're a knockout, Tame. Good luck with that. I managed to collect enough narcoberry seeds to induce slumber upon the entire nation, and I was gonna plant the other 4 crops as well to start my own farmer's market. I'm just kidding. I need them to make the taming food for Mothra. Anyways, I needed to get back in there, but the problem was, yeah, that's the problem. Luckily, since he was technically outside the cave, he wasn't able to actually hit me, I think it's visual. Could be some famous last words, to be honest. But I managed to make it past that man. And by the way, that man has 5 entire heads, which is super unfair because, for comparison, I only have 1. But when I made it back to my hermit-sized penthouse, I spent the rest of my lumber reserves to make 5 additional crop plots, while my apocalyptic neighbor's tail was stirring the water in my backyard pool. I really need to put the roof on this greenhouse, but I planted a few narcotic trees on the side here, and I had a vision for this place that required some more wood. Also, the compost bin finally produced its very first fertilizer. But after this next one, I probably won't use it anymore because with human feces, it takes like 3 for 1 fertilizer. And the toilet just straight up gifts me an entire bag of fertilizer. I wanted to go ahead and finish this thing for good though, so I scheduled a trip to finally touch grass. And I haven't actually used this third entrance over here on the very right side yet, mainly, you know, because I didn't know it existed an hour ago. But once I made it outside, the cops had found me, yet again. I had a 5-star wanted level, and they were pulling out Amber Alerts by the minute. But luckily, this man can't climb the cliff, so I just pretended he didn't exist while channeling my inner beaver and deforesting the entire country. Okay, that was an exaggeration. I chopped down like 10 trees, but I have 2,000 wood now. So I built some things, placed them down, and the crop plots at the very end are a bit too far away from the irrigation, so I spent the rest of Mr. Terminant's skin to make 22 more paste for water pipes. And I have to do this at least once a video, but I have my recording paused like the professional YouTuber that I am. But, well, it's day 27 now. While I was paused, I did some off-camera grinding where I put this second layer of irrigation that goes under the ceiling here with a tap that irrigated everything. I also put some wood pillars out front just because it looks kind of stupid without them, and I was planning on making the roof like a triangle out of greenhouse structures later, which will look pretty cool. But for these last 4 crop plots, that's where the other crops will go, and I still need fertilizer for that. But the narco berries, on the other hand, are starting to bear some drug-like fruit. And at this point, I was done with this greenhouse. I really just wanted it finished. So I spent 20 minutes fertilizing my crops, planted some long grass, savaroot, rockaroot, and citronal, which I will use to bake into a cake for a giant moth. And for some reason, everything is just super dark in here. So I made some more wall torches, meal prepped for the next 10 years, and yeah, that's the story of how I built half a greenhouse. It's kind of wild how this is my greenhouse, and this is my actual house. Totally have my priorities straight. Anyways, with the yield from my narco berry crops and the 1,000 berries I farmed earlier, I was gonna have somewhere around 500 narcotics. Probably more if I spoil some more meat. But for reference, one 500 times trank arrow does 78,750 torpor inside a primitive crossbow. But a trank dart inside a primitive rifle with a very long neck does 110,000. And since I don't have dinosaurs, meaning narcotics are incredibly difficult to come across, I folded. Rip 25 hide. And with the narcotics cooking up and some gunpowder on the back burner, it was now day 28. And while I was waiting on the narco berries, there was something I really wanted to try. You'll see what it is in a second. Hey, how's it going, dude? But when I made it outside, I saw this. This Famuto was going in and out of render, but she also has some insane stats, and with 120,000 torpor, I mean, it's a lot, but I think I can actually pull it off. There was also an Iguanot who is equally as healthy, but the dude just looks boring compared to Famuto, so it's a no from me, dog. My mind was set, and the Famuto will be mine. But I needed about 600 narcotics, and I didn't have the spoiled meat to make the last 150. And there was 3 options here. Number 1, try to slay a kaiju. No thank you. Option number 2, slay myself. That's a maybe, but it only gives me like 20 at a time probably. Or I could use the prime meat. And I did actually have a lot of prime meat, so I decided to just sacrifice half. Wait, you can't put prime meat in a toilet? I wasn't able to spoil it using my organic methods, but it does only have a 9-minute spoil timer, so I decided to actually use 3/4 of it and keep about 80 for taming. I split the other 200 into separate stacks, and now in approximately 8 minutes, we're gonna have some spoiled meat. 8 minute minutes later, there was 1 minute remaining. Almost there. Wait for it. Anytime now. Bro, you're literally on 0. And just like that, we had some pretty substantial profit. So while the narcotics were being manufactured, I used the gunpowder to make some simple rifle ammo because these Tranks plus darts require rifle ammo and metal ingots. Unfortunately though, I was only level 91. And first of all, you need to be level 100 to passive tame the passive kaiju, which is fine because Famuto is definitely not a passive tame. But the 500 times trank darts also require level 95. I was able to unlock these 200 times trank darts, but it leaves more room for me to miss a shot, which leads to me getting devoured overpowered, which leads to me losing everything. Yeah, it was gonna be risky for sure. But I did the math. And if Famuto has 120,000 torpor, 3 200 times strength darts should send her consciousness to the Shadow Realm. But if I shoot a little bit too fast, it is definitely possible that 3 will barely not be enough. So I harvested my crops, queued up 20 more, handpicked some berries while Harambe's father-in-law supervised, queued up 20 more, again, made 3 200 times sleep potions, which I laced onto darts for my long neck, and made 150 time bedtime story as a backup. And now, it was time. I'm not gonna lie, I was super nervous. If I failed this and lost these trank darts, it would take me like 10 more days to get everything back. But you can never let your fear hold you back from chasing your dreams. And Famuto was indeed the woman of my dreams. Nightmares are considered dreams, right? So I chugged some H2O, ingested 5 entire jars of honey. Well, someone just got eviscerated. And I definitely can hit a shot from here. Like, you know, I probably would, but I also could miss. And I can't afford to miss anything. I needed to get closer. And I had an idea. Hello, sir. Good morning. So back at my somewhat humble abode, I crafted 2 entire grappling hooks, and I was now out of cementing paste. I also grabbed my arrows just in case I needed to try and aggro her over, and at this point, there was no more procrastinating. It was time to take action. When I arrived outside, I grappled up. I'm not really sure if I should go all the way, because if I'm too close, she'd probably impale me, and she looked a little bit stuck on that tree. So I made a decision, and I decided to just go for it. As I shot the first arrow, I wasn't sure if I hit. Well, that scared me for a second. And the torpor went up to 44k. When I tried again, well, it didn't give me the same result. I just missed, didn't I? Oh! If I didn't miss that first shot, Famuto would be getting a full 8 hours of sleep right now. But instead, I got decapitated. Good times. I don't really know how fast her torpor actually drops, but I just had to hope that with 120k and her being a kaiju and all, that it would drop slow enough for me to make another shot and finish the job. So I wasted no time, and I started grinding. And it took me the entire rest of day 29 and part of day 30, but I had the narco berries, and I just needed some more spoiled meat. So I hired my neighbor to assassinate me, but bro breached contract and ate the body. Dude. So I went back to the top to try to get my stuff back and check on Famuto's torpor, but she was standing there, menacingly, directly on top of what used to be my body. Oh, I think she sees me. Luckily, she was too fat to fit inside of my living room, but she did brutally execute my pet Sasorisu right in front of me, and I was just gonna bite the bullet and make another spyglass and another hatchet. But then, this happened. Somehow, Ragnarona just teleported into my garage.
Here in my garage.
Anyways, I made another spyglass and some tools as a backup, and when I made it back, well, I'm pretty sure Famuto just avenged my death because I don't see Ragnarona anywhere, but when I finally spyglassed her, she was at 80,000, which means that she did lose 10,000 torpor, but it was dropping slow enough for me to actually pull this off. So I got my stuff back, thanks to that tree over there and her low IQ, and I low-key just wasted 20 hide making those backup tools, but it'll be good to have them in case I die again. Or when I die again. For the many more times I'm gonna die again. Anyways, I forgot about the 85 prime meat that I had on my body, and Famuto only needs 3 to tame. So that, in combination with some cannibal-related activities, 66 meat, okay, was almost enough. But I decided to add a bed to the greenhouse so I don't have to wait so long to respawn every time. Wait, is it raining inside a cave?
Yes, science.
That moment when you have no friends. So instead you just farm yourself for meat. On day 31, I made 136 meat highly inedible. Crafted 136 narcotics. Split most of the prime meat to spoil, and crafted one more 200 times bedtime story. And this, in combination with the 50 times one that I had from earlier, should be enough. But I'm level 94 now, by the way. And next time we'll have the 500 times ones. Anyways, it was time for one last shot, literally. Famuto was kinda far away, and she kept spazzing around trying to make me miss. I know what you're doing, and it's not gonna work, buddy. I was super paranoid about missing the shot again, and I waited until she got closer, but I ended up waiting a bit too long. I got the shot off, and that's all I really cared about, but once I reincarnated inside a drug lab, Harambe's father-in-law was literally camping outside, first in line for midnight release. But when I made it back outside, she was down to her knees. Famuto's dump truck was staring right back at me, and it was so large that I died from a heart attack on the spot. What? Okay, so apparently what happened there was that she has like this aura that evaporates you if you get close to her. You literally just die for being in her presence. But I have to somehow get my stuff back and actually feed her the prime meat. So I decided to use the other entrance and loop around. That is one plus-sized lady. But once again, her presence was too menacing, and I perished. How am I supposed to feed her? I tried to come up with a solution, but outside of grapples, which are inside my body that's next to Famuto, the only thing I could think of was to make some flak armor and see if I could survive for at least a couple seconds. Well, there goes 70 hide. On my way back outside, I ventured into enemy territory to grab this white drop. It was terrible. But when I made it back over, I discovered that armor does indeed stop me from dying, but it still hurts a ton and the armor breaks really fast. I got super close, but in the end, the result was the same. So I crafted yet another set of flak armor, just throwing my hide into a meat grinder at this point. Placed down a cooking pot, used some spark powder, tinto berries, narcotics, and some water to cook up 9 medical brews. Which, by the way, that took like 5 minutes because these things take the meaning of slow roast to a whole new level. But what happened next, well, I'm definitely not proud of. I did manage to actually get my stuff back, but then I forgot to drink the medical brew. Why am I like this? But there was one more thing that I wanted to try before wasting even more hide and metal on another set of flak. What if I don't touch the floor? So I placed a thatch foundation. It didn't work. This is so annoying, bro. I picked the one tame that I need a flyer for in a challenge where I can't tame a flyer. This last set of flak armor used all of the rest of my metal. It was the very last time I was going to be able to attempt this. Luckily, my last body was super close to the foundation, and despite a lot of pain, I got my stuff back. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose all of the prime meat again, so I made a storage box. I put all my extra flak and prime in there, and I waited until I was full health before giving it one last shot. I made it. I finally made it. I was on top of the leg of an unconscious heathen, but I couldn't access the inventory for some reason, so I like wiggled my way up her femur until the inventory appeared. Forcefully lodged 7 entire slices of prime meat directly into her trachea. And since it's been like 45 minutes since I knocked her out, she ate the whole thing in one bite. Let's go, dude. Oh, that was so annoying. Famuto has been successfully gaslit into being my indentured servant. Indentured friend. And she marks Kaiju number 1 out of 53. I decided to name her Death Aura because I've experienced it firsthand, but now was the fun part, testing her combat skills on my neighbors. The basic attack only does 500 damage, but the left trigger slam did 1500. That was all that Mr. Sasorisu could handle, but spoiler alert, her other attacks do more. A lot more. Anyways, that Sasorisu gave me 150 Kaiju G cells, which I can upgrade into the enhanced cells to take on some of the bigger stuff. I think I should invest into some parachutes. So after I got the rest of my stuff back, I made a soul trap to make sure Death Aura was safe, which is basically just a cryopod, but normal cryopods don't work on giant mod creatures, so yeah. By the way, if you want to see my mod list, it's in the description. Anyways, it was now day 33, and I entered the cave. And for some reason, every time that I think I'm safe, well, this happens. What is going on over here? Somehow Colossalus has mastered the power of teleportation, and he was busy exterminating an infestation of ants from Australia. I should have just turned around then and there, and minded my own business, but he drop-kicked an ant so hard that the body had drifted into my territory, and I couldn't resist. I don't know how these ants have so much chitin on their body, but it's kind of ridiculous. But me being encumbered, mixed with the honey slowdown, well, Mrs. Terminant Queen wasn't too happy that I was skinning her family. No, please. And despite my best efforts, I got corroded by acid or something. She did fall into the water though, giving birth to hundreds of absolute warriors by the second. That's a whole lot of degenerates. I was gonna just take her out with my crossbow because I assumed that Death Aura was too big to summon down here. But then one of her oversized children ended my career multiple times. Oh! But this time I spawned on my greenhouse, and I'm actually not getting spawn trapped anymore. The queen was in the water, but her army of children were pretty much everywhere. It was kind of terrifying. But then I remembered, these dudes have a hive mind, and they won't actually attack me unless she aggroes. Imagine being a simp. And since she was over in the water, I was able to get my stuff back without aggroing, and I tried to spawn Famuto, but yeah, she's a little bit overweight. I should really make these caves more accommodating for fat people. So there was only one option left. I started shooting. Are they destroying my drug lab? Bro! The Terminant Queen marks Kaiju number 2 out of 53. And the Sasorisu that Famuto sent to the Shadow Realm on day 32 marks Kaiju number 3 out of 53. Sorry, I kind of forgot about that one. But the Terminant's children were still living rent-free in my apartment, and I didn't know what to do. It's a good thing that I made those pipes out of metal, but if I didn't act fast enough, my crops would all be destroyed. And there were way too many for me to fight, especially on foot. So as a last resort, I decided to go all the way out of the cave to leave render distance, and I was hoping that would de-aggro them. Over in the overworld, Callisto fell out of a tree. But anyways, when I made it back down, I think it actually worked. They all de-aggroed, and since their queen is dead, because of me, they really shouldn't attack me again. So I thanked them for their service, told them I come in peace, and I guess I just have 10 roommates now. At least until I figure out a way to evict them. The rent is due on the 3rd, and I expect 100 chitin from each of you. But when I made it back to my base, I saw this. Hi. I think I made the spawn rates a bit too insane. Anyways, I entered my house and then disposed of someone's corpse in my bedroom. And I was going through my inventory when this random torpor regenerator was added to my inventory. Wait, did Colossalus... Yep, that man's gone. Used to lower torpor of a kaiju. Bro, can you chill? I'm trying to read the lore. On day 34, after organizing the smithy and repairing my medieval armor, I tried to harvest the Terminant Queen, but she only gave me meat. So instead I harvested the lifeless remains of 2 of my roommates, which gave me 1,000 organic polymer and over 2,000 chitin. I guess getting raided was kind of a good thing. I also chopped up Mr. Colossalus to see what was inside. And to be honest, I wish I didn't. That man had 21 eyes and 28 pinnacles? Yeah, me too. Anyways, I was about to set back out with a Famuto named Deathora to get my revenge on this world. But first, well, my tenants trashed my greenhouse, so I had to make 2 more crop plots, repair my other crop plots, and fertilize my crops. But since the narcotics take super long to craft in a basic mortar and pestle, I wanted to queue up some while I was on vacation. So I grabbed the 1,300 meat that I harvested from random home invaders and my roommates, stuck it inside my toilet bowl, sat down on said toilet bowl, and participated in some foul-smelling activities. Each one of the narcoberry plants gave me about 50 berries right now, so I queued up another 200 narcotics, and I also decided to spend 50 hide on some parachutes because I would prefer to not break my legs every time I dismount Deathora. Anyways, it was time to head out, so I left Kevin in charge. This is Kevin. Kevin, say hi.
Help me!
The crop plots aren't as great as I had hoped, and yeah, I can get maybe 400 berries a day, but that's only 80 narcotics a day, and I need like 1,000 minimum for most of the bigger stuff. So I'm really hoping I can find a kaiju that can actually harvest berries, but I'm not sure if that's possible. Anyways, directly outside my apartment complex, I saw Kevin's brother, and since Kevin's a chill guy, I decided to let him live. But Wood along the apocalyptic dragon was on my left, and Gigan was on my right. I'm pretty certain both of these dudes would absolutely destroy all of my hopes and dreams, so I decided to keep my distance. There were plenty of other degenerates for Deathora to annihilate. But then, I saw Beast Stallion, and you know what? Bring it on, buddy. And just like that, Deathora has asserted dominance over these peasants. Killing kaiju is kinda nuts for XP, and that whole round of Fight Club just gave Deathora 81 levels? Her health was already over 500k, and it didn't go up too much per level, but I got it to 700k, and I put all of the rest into melee. This one tame just fixed my survival problem my hide problem, and my spoiled meat problem. Oh, how the turns have tabled. But I had to be super careful. One wrong move, and I could aggro something 10 times stronger. Death Aura is also super fast to get around the map, but I did still want to fly her, so I don't have to worry about things being stronger than me. But I was still looking for fights, and this leatherback here was a pretty fair matchup. Bro just got clapped. This man was strong, but luckily he was only level 35. And after I stopped being stunned, the fight commenced. Death Aura has like 5 different attacks, and nothing looks too fancy. To be honest, most of them are pretty boring looking, but they do a lot of damage. There's a few different versions of slams that do like 20 to 30k each, but when I start spamming buttons on my controller, and some that aren't on my controller, Shift Q on my keyboard makes her start Naruto running. And since this man is built like a brick wall, she just runs in place while doing 35k per second. Bro's getting destroyed. And it wasn't long before I removed his spinal cord from his leathery back. 7,000 hide? The leatherback marks Kaiju number 4 out of 53. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but Beastallion getting evaporated, a Kooky Rai becoming one with the earth, and Colossalus getting emancipated from life marks Kaiju number 5, Kaiju number 6, and Kaiju number 7 out of 53. And I know that I said this before, but even though a lot of the Kaiju are kinda weak compared to Death Aura here, there is a solid 15 to 20 of them dudes that are either stronger, much stronger, or straight up broken beyond all logical reasoning. But I still had to take them all out. So after dismantling our robot overlord, marking Kaiju number 8 out of 53, I proceeded to abolish a few peasants from their meaningless existence, and that Gigamoth was Kaiju number 9 out of 53, by the way. And I decided to try and scout around for something that seems vegetarian, because I really needed a berry farm. Hey, how's it going, dude? The search for a humble berry connoisseur began with a behemoth who is allegedly the legendary beast from Monster Island, Mr. Owl, and this Shimo guy that looks like he belongs in the Frozen Isle. He had 1.3 million health and was only level 40, and a high level of that would be pretty insane. I'm not gonna lie, I really wanted one. But I would need a whole lot of bedtime stories to cure that man's insomnia. So after drop-kicking Mr. Sosorisu's albino nephew, I accidentally yeeted myself into a giant piece of broccoli. Oh no, no, no. And I guess broccoli really is good for you, because she has 1.6 million health and was way stronger than Death Aura. I was running for my life, when somehow I ended up in the middle of the Revolutionary War. What is going on here? Everywhere is covered in death. It's almost like I replaced every dinosaur with kaiju or something. But I continued on, and after making it out of the grasslands, I arrived at the outskirts of the snow, home to the silhouette of a sociopath, that thing over there that I'm pretty sure is the real Godzilla himself, and someone who brings death, but not regular death, white death. The fact that I can see his health bar from all the way over here, and there's Churno Alpha, and more broccoli. Bro, I'm going back. It was now day 36, and before breakfast, my game crashed. These spawn rates might be an issue. Anyways, I decided to head back to base so I could put some of this hide, chitin, and meat inside just in case something bad happens. There was way more than I could carry here though, so I was using this storage box to hold it when I turned around and this happened. What? No, don't do it, please. 11 million? So I just got digested by a siren. Well, at least I can check that one off my bucket list. When I reincarnated inside a greenhouse, I farmed some narcotics because money doesn't grow on trees, but drugs do. I needed to get my stuff back, so I repaired some flak armor. Well, I tried to. I'm kind of out of metal. I feel a bit exposed. So after making some intense eye contact with Kevin, I grabbed my stuff, summoned a Death Aura. I summoned a Death Aura. I got deleted. Okay, really? Luckily, he has a siren instead of a brain. So I got the attention of this imbecile, and I kited this despicable specimen outside of my house. And with the pathway all clear, I got my stuff back, grabbed what I could. Bro, I keep finding bags like everywhere. How many times have I died in this video? If anyone counted that, first of all, why? But second of all, please let me know. So after spending the entire night of day 36, making a few more trips to Death Aura's bag so I can hoard resources in my 2 foundation-wide penthouse, day 37 began. And after spending half the day executing metal fans, cracking open some crystal light, and fighting a tree to the death, I needed to come up with a plan. Death Aura is insane, but there's like 15 other things I want to tame, and I really needed a berry farmer first. Mothra might actually work, and with my greenhouse, I do have everything needed to cook her favorite snack. And while I was checking the engrams, I also noticed some summoners for 3 different boss titan things. Some nukes that Godzilla can swallow whole, by the way, to evolve. Somehow. Skullcrawler's saddle, which comes with a minigun. What? That sounds amazing. And Super Godzilla's food, a Kiryu assembly plant. Well, you get the point. There's a whole lot going on. But on a base level, for the easier stuff, I can use the dead Kaiju G-cells combined with element to make enhanced Kaiju G-cells, which can be used to turn into evolved G-cells for taming. But anyways, after a piece of broccoli took over my upstairs hallway, how are you even here? I summoned Death Aura and pub stomped Siren Head for funsies, but I was searching for one last time to see if anything else around here ate berries. I found a Skullcrawler, which is the dude with the minigun on his saddle, which is pretty awesome, but does that say passive tame? Yeah, let me just go try and make peace with a psychopath. Anyways, after Skullcrawler did a backflip, that was kind of impressive, I witnessed Death Aura's cousin 1v1ing a Sasorisu with a cyan paint job, a sea of degenerates including Beastallion that had too much Taco Bell, and over in the distance, Rodon. Ooh, now that would be a cool flyer. But as I got closer, passive tame? Why is things that want to kill me a passive tame? Eventually, I'm gonna have to figure out how to passive tame these guys. But after one-shotting a Venus flytrap named Carniflora, 10 out of 53 kaiju have been eviscerated. And I saw yet another King Kong. And, well, not only is King Kong extremely small compared to everything else, but he's a vegan. And being a vegan doesn't automatically mean you possess skills in the farming berries department, but it was definitely worth a shot. Okay, why does that dude render in from like 10 foot away? But it was now day 38, and these narco berries weren't gonna farm themselves. One hour later, 4,559. That's how many narco berries I can farm in 1 hour. The Y button on my controller is low-key screaming for help right now, and I'm pretty sure that that would have only taken 5 minutes with a Bronto. All I'm saying is one of these kaiju dudes better be able to farm narco berries, because this is pretty bad. But when these narcotics finish crafting and get injected into my world-famous sleeping pills, I'll have roughly 265,000 torpor worth of nighttime routines. Basically, 2 500 times and 1 200 times strength dart. But if I could get a better long neck rifle, the darts would do way more torpor each. And it's kind of a long shot, but I'll keep an eye out for purple and yellow supply drops for that. Also, these narcotics craft way too slow in a mortar and pestle, and now that I have a generational supply of hide, I should probably try and craft a chem bench to speed it up. So I made another mortar and pestle dedicated to cementing paste and spark powder so I don't interrupt my drug production. And I booked a quick trip to the great outdoors, where Skullcrawler was ARK survival descending from a mountain. But the main reason I was here was to mine some more rocks than Rockwell himself, and some crystal for a greenhouse. I did have to hire Death Aura to Naruto run on a peasant on the way home. But once I made it back to my humble abode and put all of the stone and chitin inside, it only made 300 cementing paste. Back to the mines, I guess. On day 41, I advanced to the Industrial Age. We're moving up in the world. But despite my best efforts, I don't think that this big boy is fitting inside my apartment. So I put my thinking cap on, and I decided to get rid of the stinky trash bins in this back room. And I was gonna expand my greenhouse to be, well, still a greenhouse, but like my actual house too. When I built this thing, I wasn't really expecting to expand, so now there's a rusty pipe in my kitchen. And now there's a rusty pipe outside my window, but that works, I guess. Anyways, I had to grind some more stone to finish construction on my new rental property, which took the rest of day 41. But on day 42, now that I'm no longer living inside of a shoebox, I wanted to make that chem bench for narcotics. It's kind of like graduating from an RV to a full-blown drug lab. So I got everything inside the fabricator, put some oil and hide inside the refining forge to make gas to power it, and I kind of had to wait on the metal before I could do anything. So in the meantime, I worked diligently on my greenhouse. I'll have to finish this later, because right now the narcotics were almost finished crafting, and I managed to make 2 500 times and 1 50 times potency bedtime story, which is enough to treat a 230k torpor insomniac to the best sleep of his life. But even though it would be super cool to start taming strong stuff, I had to stick to the plan. So I crushed Fenrir under the weight of Death Aura's massive size 43 foot, marking Kaiju number 11 out of 53. And I really needed to find a Mothra, a King Kong, or some other species of vegetarian. So after my game crashed again, this happened. Oh my! Why is there so many? No matter where I went, the kaiju follow. Basically, the render distance is just really low, but these dudes are spawning everywhere. And that's when I saw Greg. And well, if you watched my other videos, then you know we go way back. And I have a deep-rooted hatred for that man. So I took this opportunity to declare war. Greg, of course, obliged and summoned his ex-wife per usual. So I then humbly proceeded to execute her. My mortal enemy named Greg marks Kaiju number 12 out of 53. And despite him seeming like an easier flyer to tame than Mothra, well, you're not catching me being friendly with Greg. Anyways, over in the distance, I saw him. That man was about to receive the highest potency bedtime story his ears have ever experienced. But then Harambe's father's father showed up. What is up with this render distance? Oh, is that Mothra? Mothra was here too, but unfortunately, so was her pet Broccoli. I completely forgot about Mothra being a passive tame, and I really wanted a flyer and a berry farm. I think I could actually pull this off. So I sprinted back to base as fast as Death Aura's creepy looking legs could take me, witnessed a behemoth get put in a spin cycle, man just got KO'd, and arrived back at my humble abode. I somehow had an elder costume, which can be used to turn Behemoth the legendary beast into Behemoth the boomer. But that's not why I was here. Enough metal was cooked to craft the chemistry bench. So narcotics will go a lot faster now, but Mothra is a passive tame, meaning the narcotics were useless and I needed to cook up her favorite snack. So after harvesting my drug plants and crafting about 200 more narcotics and a 200 times and a 100 times strength art, just to make sure I don't waste any more than I need to, I harvested the crops and went to craft some Mothra snacks. But apparently, each one of these little vegan looking cupcakes has 50 of each. You're telling me you want a cupcake with 200 entire vegetables and 100 buckets of stimulants all inside? Fair enough. So I had to put that on hold for now, and I didn't even have the metal to make a fridge because I'm low-key house poor, but I could still go for King Kong. So I grabbed some Mayho berries with the intention of shoving them down his esophagus during some brainwashing, summoned Death Aura, and spotted a red drop. Ooh. But due to the entire landscape being infested with various degrees of heathens, before I could even claim the red drop, I had to draft Death Aura into the military. But before the fight was over, well, the drop disappeared. Really, bro? I did find a yellow drop, but it just had a flamethrower and a bunch of blueprints for things that I do not need. But King Kong was directly ahead, and the giant broccoli was over there beefing with someone that didn't even render in. Oh, she's summoning the bird mafia. This must be serious. And from here, it looked like King Kong was alone, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Okay, this is just ridiculous. I had to clear the area before I could even gaslight this monkey man. So I did that. But in the process, King Kong got caught in the crossfire. Oh no! Well, I guess King Kong marks Kaiju number 12 out of 53, and that's not at all how I wanted to mark him off the list. Why am I like this? But I could easily find another one in the redwoods. They spawn like everywhere. But first though, I wanted to explore a bit more while I was out. I've only really explored the redwoods and this little central grasslands area, but there's 4 other biomes that all have unique Kaiju spawns. There were a ton of these iguanot dudes over to the east, and since my Death Aura was down to 300k health at this point, I don't think there's any way I'm surviving that. But over by the river, I saw a familiar face. Well, he doesn't really have a face, but this reminded me that I executed one of these hoodlums earlier and I completely forgot to count it. So it's only right that I end his life yet again. This pathetic excuse for a kaiju marks Kaiju number 13 out of 53. But as I made my way through the tropical south area, there was a few more siren heads and a whole lot of iguanons. It does make sense because nothing really spawns here, just a bunch of dodos and the occasional dilo or whatever. But there was also a giant salmon who I will be staying away from, a Kiryu guy who has rocket launchers and I will also be staying away from, and Godzilla himself over in the distance. I think he makes a pretty good candidate to also stay away from. I think I'd seen enough for now. I don't want to do anything that puts Death Aura's life at risk until I have more kaiju and a reliable method of farming narco berries. So I decided to continue the search for Harambe's father-in-law, when a pack of Titania fairy tale dragons just like teleported into my peripheral vision. Well, that was easy. The level 5 Titania, who was super weak and low-key a disgrace to his family, marks Kaiju number 14 out of 53. And he actually drops these Fey relic things, which can be used to tame the Titania Monarch Queen. Bro just got violated. But over on the side, by a pair of broccoli cosplayers, I found him. This version of Harambe's father was only level 5, which is kind of questionable. Whoa, what is that dude? Looks like an evolved Godzilla or something. By the way, my game crashed again. But over in the Redwoods, I found a red drop with a ring around it. A ring around a supply drop means it's like a double 2 drops in one. But inside, well, the flak BP was okay, I guess, but I was a bit disappointed. Anyways, the search for a monkey that was higher than level 5 continued on. And after getting assaulted by the Quetzal Battalion, I saw another Rodon, and I remembered, how are these dudes a passive tame? It had me a bit curious, so I decided to look into it using the Googles, and apparently Rodon here is tamed with fire like a phoenix. And the Skullcrawler dude that enjoys doing backflips on the regular is tamed by sacrificing your tames, just like a Trudon. But there were degenerates everywhere. Some were older than others, and it was getting so bad that my game would not stop crashing. So I had to wipe the dinosaur spawns again to make the game actually playable. But don't worry, because it didn't take long before the earth was covered in kaiju once again. And one of those kaiju was in fact Harambe's father-in-law. How many father-in-laws does he have? He was kinda close to my cave, which is great, but he was also near this iguanodon, who had 600k health. Oh boy. I knew that Famuto was faster than him, so I decided to go for the fight because I can always bail if needed. Bro, why aren't you fighting back? Okay, now I just feel bad. I think that Death Aura is like too tall or something because these things have absolutely decimated me in the past. But something that I didn't realize, however, was iguanods eat berries. This dude could be a berry farmer. But he also has 300k torpor, and my arrows would only do about 280k worth. I really wanted to tame this vegetarian, so I decided to let him live. And I set my sights back on this fella. My Trank Dart was a bit overkill because his torpor is super low for some reason. Also, Fenrir was over there looking at me weird, so I stepped on him with an alien. And I made a quick run down to my green house to craft a 10 times Trank, which by the way does 2.2k and wasn't enough anyways, so I just used the 50 times. Right in the kidney. King Kong was in his slumber era, and after some grinding, I threw a fastball using an entire stack of Mayho berries directly down his windpipe, but it seemed like his torpor was dropping a lot faster than he was taming, and after a few minutes, I can confirm it was. I don't really have any narcotics minus the berries I'm picking right now, so about 5 minutes later when his torpor dropped below 600, I launched the 10 times dart directly into his elbow. And it took a while, and I had to go back and make some more narcotics just to make sure the dude didn't go woke. But halfway through day 46, Harambe Sr. was tamed. And now for the moment of truth. Is he skilled in berry picking? He is not. I even tried throwing a rock at the bushes to see if it would convince them to pick themselves, but alas, no berries. Did I just use the word alas in a sentence? What am I, a pirate? Harambe Sr. was kind of useless because his stats weren't great compared to other kaiju. He has a 300-meter vertical though. Anyways, it's nice to have a tame that can actually fit inside my cave though. That's kind of concerning. But also, Mothra was here again. And this time she was only level 30. Which, I mean, that is a bad thing because it means she's weaker, but it also means that she's easier to tame, which is a good thing. And if I can get a flyer who also potentially farms berries, that could be pretty huge for this run. Because if I don't find a berry farmer soon, I might have to do the rest of this run with passive tames, and I do not want to do that. So as day 46 was coming to an end, I upgraded my green penthouse with a fridge and a generator, because I wanted to tame that Mothra, and I had to keep the crops from spoiling until we have more. So on day 47, I took Harambe just in case we run into any Siren-headed degenerates, and I pressed the Y button a lot of times for 30 minutes. What am I doing with my life? 1,900 narco berries later, which allowed me to make one more 500 times narcotic. Well, I still didn't have enough. So after a bit more Y buttons and some questionable hygiene practices, I now had enough for 2 more 200 times tranks as well. And with that, I had 2 main goals. The first was to tame the iguanot from earlier using these tranks, and pray to the vegan gods that he can collect berries. And the second goal was to build a robot, Cherno Alpha. I was planning on building something like Cherno Alpha because it won't require tranks, and I wanted something big that was actually useful, not the little Jaeger bros, no offense. But I needed 5,000 metal and 2,500 crystal for that dude, and it was gonna be a grind. Anyways, I located Mr. Iguanot, slayed his neighbor, and lined up the shot. Wait, no! Somehow, I just shot Death Aura with 500 doses of NyQuil. That took me 30 minutes to make, man. There was also a level 140 Gigant above my cave. Now that would be a cool flyer. But he has 700k torpor, and I don't have, like, any narcotics left. Anyways, I really hate to say what happened next, because it low-key ruined my will to exist. But essentially, here's what happened. I walked over to a vegetarian degenerate, shot one of my best-selling lullabies directly into his love handle, didn't realize that his torpor was completely cut in half, and then I did it again. So in the end, I just used a total of 1,500 narcotics, including the one that almost put Death Aura in a coma, but the iguanot was nowhere close to being knocked out, because for whatever reason, even on headshots, he takes half the torpor that he's supposed to. My luck is just immaculate. So on day 49, I utilized Harambe's weight capacity to do a proper metal run for the first time. And I managed to get a few thousand before my pickaxe was about to break. So about halfway through the day, I noticed that Iguanot had barely lost torpor, and there was still a chance. I just wasn't exactly sure if it would be worth using a whole 2,000 more narcotics on this dude, but I was definitely getting close to summoning our robot overlord named Cherno Alpha. I just needed to wait on the metal to cook. So while that was happening, I gathered all of my crops, and at this point, I had enough for 2 Mothra snacks. And the only ingredients left were sap and stimulants. So I blackmailed this redwoods tree into donating me some sap, grabbed a bunch of plants with my bare hands until I had 500 stem berries, made some water skins, and shoved it all inside a muffin, which is allegedly Mothra's favorite. The Mothra's snacks would spoil in just over an hour, but all I needed was 30 seconds, because she was still living inside my upstairs bedroom. Now, I'll be honest, I was expecting that to only take 1 feed, and the second Mothra snack was actually just a precaution, but are you telling me that this level 30 moth, wants 4 entire cupcakes? I mean, I've probably ate 4 cupcakes at once before in my life, but still, this might be an issue. I actually do have everything I needed to make a 3rd snack. I just needed some more stem berries and some more water skins because it puts the entire water skin into the cupcake, not just the water. Some questionable cooking practices.
And it looks like Gandhi's flip-flop.
That'll be enough to get this giant moth to 90%, but I didn't have the 4th and final snack that she was craving. Also, passive tames in these mods are notorious for taking an extremely long time in between feeds, which is why I prefer knockout tames normally, because they only eat 1 berry and then somehow have a full stomach for 3 in-game days. But anyways, I digress. While Mothra was working up an appetite, I checked on the metal, and with everything cooked so far, I had over 1k, which is 1/5 of what I needed for a Cherno Alpha. And it's been around 20 minutes at this point since I fed her a cupcake, so I decided to go check on her. And to my surprise, well, she was actually hungry again. I was fully expecting this to take over an hour for the first feed, but the ready to eat thing was just a visual glitch with the amazing spyglass, and she's not actually ready a 3rd time yet. So I put the blue muffin looking thing back inside my fridge and waited another 20 minutes while farming narco berries to pass the time. On day 51, Mothra was ready for breakfast. And luckily, the long wait between feeding was actually a good thing, because I have the crop growth speed boosted a little bit, and the extra 20 crops I needed had grown overnight. So I dropped my water jar so it doesn't use those to craft the Mothra snack, crafted another blue cupcake, and fed it to a giant winged specimen. I can't believe I actually just pulled that off. Mothra marks Kaiju number 15 out of 53, and I decided to name her Cupcake because she ate 4 of them things. But what happened next was nothing short of a miracle. She's a vegan! She might have just single-handedly made this entire run possible. We must protect Cupcake at all costs. Cupcake managed to farm more narcotics in 20 seconds than I can in an entire day. Oh, I cannot wait to tame something with this. So after I fabricated 10 parachutes so I don't shatter my ankles, I laced 2 more of the 500 times strength darts because I wanted to see if the iguana was still out there with the high torpor. Spoiler alert. He was not. I mean, I didn't really need him anymore anyways, but I just feel some type of way after he made me waste 1,500 narcotics. Anyways, Mothra was kind of slow. But then I realized that this giant moth that probably weighs over 500 decillion kilograms can actually glide like a griffin. She just gets better and better. So I decided to test her combat skills on the Broodmother's mother, but I didn't even need to hit. Ark need a skin crawler, will crawl no more, marking Kaiju number 16 out of 53. And just like with Death Aura, killing one Kaiju gave me 70 levels. And since Mothra is a flyer, I decided to pump up the stamina a lot. But this way I don't have to land in the Kaiju infested grassland. I also noticed that her health scaling is kind of insane, like way better than Death Aura's, and I managed to get it all the way to 1,000,000, pump some of her melee, and then pump the stamina even more. And for something that started at level 30, well, the stats are way better than Death Aura. But anyways, this red drop gave me a homing rocket, and Cupcake here has a rapid healing ability. I'm pretty sure that she isn't really meant to do a lot of damage. She's more of a support that can like buff and heal and all that, which is pretty great because I'm gonna need that when I make an army for some of the final boss fights. Anyways, I thought that the left trigger would pick things up, but instead, I accidentally murdered Kevin's cousin. Oops, my bad, bro. But while she's landed on the ground, Mothra can do this slam attack. A debuff thing that makes you hoarse apparently, and this buff thing that increases damage and decreases damage taken, which is really nice. So I decided to ground pound Siren Head because he deserves death. Okay. With Cupcake by my side, the opportunities were endless, and I had to be extra careful that I didn't get her killed. So I decided to spend the rest of day 51 doing a fat narco berry run.
Hey, yo, what the?
And on day 52, I headed back inside the cave. Titania's wife was here, and I wasn't sure if that would cause any problems, so I decided to bludgeon her. But Mothra is kinda bad at hand-to-hand combat, probably because she doesn't have hands. Anyways, it got the job done, and Titania marks Kaiju number 17 out of 53. But I don't think I'll be taking on anything bigger with this cupcake-loving moth. Anyways, when I made it back to base, I transported like 40,000 narco berries into my drug lab, and now that the limiting resource is actually spoiled meat, I gathered everything that I could find, which was a few thousand, dropped a load, and queued up a felony amount of hardcore narcotics. Each one of these 10,000 narco berry stacks will produce 4 of the 500 times strength darts. So I have like 13 of them things cooking up right now, and if anything happens, I'll at least be able to get some more tames. But the main issue right now was Death Aura and Cupcake are super low health. So I crafted this medieval potion smithy looking thing, because if I don't use a potion to heal my kaiju, they'll basically still be low health on day 100, because the numbers are just way too big. But the potions are kind of expensive, so I took Cupcake out to farm some stem berries, made a grill to cook up some Krabby Patties and prime meat, brewed 2 suspiciously healthy beverages, and poured them down the throat of a moth named Cupcake and an alien named Death Aura. Anyways, I spent the night staring at a pile of garbage and migrating Cupcake south for the winter. I mainly just wanted to see what else was spawning in these other biomes, and spoiler alert, the desert and the snow are the absolute worst. The desert may not be completely covered in sociopaths like the grasslands is, but Shin Godzilla here, that dude looks sick, was just the beginning. Super Godzilla, 5 million health. I think it might be time to go home. Super Godzilla was kind of insane, but then there's this guy. Doug? What kind of name is... Okay. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm terrified of that man named Doug. But something like Shin Godzilla here, Shimo over here, or even a Gigan, because I think he can fly, would be really cool to try out and put into my army for the final Kaiju boss fight. And by the way, if you're curious, the regular Godzilla here is somewhere in between the Shin Godzilla and the Super Godzilla. Definitely too strong for me though right now. Bro just chased me to the end of the earth. So after admiring how absolutely insane this map looks with all these random health bars, I found the worst yellow drop of all time and continued exploring until I reached the volcano, and accidentally aggroed Rodon. Oh no. This man can definitely kill Mothra, but luckily the gliding ability gave me enough of a speed boost to actually get away. But that was close. Anyways, the floating island area seems like half of the creatures are just drowning because they spawned in the water below the island. And I didn't really even enter the snow, but I could see Woodalong having a hypothermia party on top of that mountain over there. I would have kept exploring more, but my game crashed. Anyways, it was time to take a vote and make a very important decision on what I was gonna tame next. So after 2 Jaegers spawned right in front of my eyes, the narcotics were done cooking, so I queued up some stronger stuff, and with about half the metal cooked for Cherno Alpha, I had 19 500 times tranks and a few smaller ones to fill in the gaps. My ultimate goal was to build the strongest army possible to take down the 3 untamable bosses. Those guys have upwards of 50 million health, but anyways, I was headed towards the tropical islands because things were a bit more spaced out there, and it should be pretty easy to knock them out because you can shoot a trank arrow while riding a cupcake. She's not even a moth at this point, just a straight goat. Anyways, I had a few things in mind. I would absolutely love to tame Godzilla, and I do have the tranks for it, but I know for a fact that this man can shoot lasers out of his mouth, and I'm 95% sure that they will delete me off the back of Mothra. I can't risk her. So it's either a Shimo, a Gigan, but they're not this one because he's level 10, or I could just go for the off-brand Grandpa Zilla over here from 1954. And since he only has 244,000 torpor, the risk was pretty low. So I loaded some heavy-duty nighttime routines into my rifle, the one with a long neck, launched one directly into his Adam's apple, launched a second one through his retina directly into the prefrontal cortex, and loaded a 100 times dart to finish him off. Boomer down. He was ready for the gaslighting, but I needed some prime meat. I tried to fight the Pacific Rim cretin over here, who was only level 5 by the way, but Cupcake's a bit too weak. So I tried to summon Death Aura when the dude just disappeared out of thin air. What? Oh. Okay then. So instead I just swatted this dragonfly and I was about to place the prime meat inside this old man's walker. But then this happened. Ow! Godzilla from 1954 had a death aura just like the Famuta. But after chugging 7 entire jars of honey, I was feeling a bit better. And with some careful maneuvering, I forced Gramps to eat his prime. Grampzilla marks Tame number 18 out of 53. And I'm sorry, but I just can't take this dude seriously, bro. Even his atomic breath is in black and white, and that is kind of cool. But I'll test him out in a bit, because it was now day 54, and I also want to get one of each Godzilla to compare to each other later on. Ooh, Shin Godzilla is kind of nice. But I was saving my darts for now, because I really wanted to get one of those Shimos. These dudes' health bars show up from all the way across the map, and this probably should have been enough of a warning to keep me away, but instead, I used that to locate the level 119. The dude was in the snow, and a random goldfish was trying to start the war of Bikini Bottom. But as I spectated, this hypothermia connoisseur looked up towards the heavens and proceeded to play laser tag with the moon. And then he spawned in a blizzard and a meteor shower at the same time. Ice is over here falling from the sky. I'm very hungry. And then Mothra just turned into a snow globe. Frosty the Snowman here was not making this easy. And at the very least, I needed to find one that wasn't at war with literally everyone. And that's where this level 100 comes in. I'll be honest, this was incredibly stupid. I had the tranks I needed, and it would only take 6. But if Mothra dies, I would have no method of getting more. This was very risky. Frosty the Snow Globe was down, and after I eviscerated Mr. Jaeger, I thought we were okay. But Behemoth the legendary beast was heading over, and I didn't realize that Shimo's torpor was dropped extremely fast. And just like that, Hypothermia Land was the death of me. Yeah, I messed up pretty bad. But when I respawned, my game crashed. And when I loaded in, mid-air by the way, the game must have rolled back. But Mothra is out of render in the air, and I'm now stranded. Grampzilla was low-key kinda trash, but he was flexing on the haters.
I was too busy blocking out the haters.
And then, my game crashed again. This time I actually managed to hit the parachute early enough, and I started spamming whistles like Flowrider because I needed Cupcake to follow. By the way, I am aware that there's like a 50-50 chance Mothra would be dead right now if my game didn't crash, but I'm not even complaining, bro, because if I have to deal with crashes every 20 minutes, then it's only fair that I get to benefit from it at least once. Anyways, I was rolled back to right before I started shooting at Shimo, and Super Godzilla was making an appearance in the distance, but then you'll never guess what happened next. My game crashed. Yeah, I left the snow. The Shimo was a lost cause, but over in the grassland, I found a level 150 gigant. Ooh. So I lined up my long-necked rifle, missed, and then I noticed there's a level 140 Godzilla over here. I was kind of scared because last time I used this mod, the dude lasered me off the back of my Griffin from 25 galaxies away. But you know what? I have Mothra to protect. Let's give this a shot. The first shot was a success, and I confirmed that there wasn't any headshot multipliers or anything, so I lined up the second one towards his back. And this Mothra hover strat was kind of OP. I don't know if it's the location, my height in the air, or what, but if this dude doesn't try to snipe me, we're good. And after switching to the 200 times dart to finish this man off, Godzilla was down. Why was that so easy? Godzilla himself is a pescatarian, meaning he only eats fish, but not any ordinary fish. This man wants me to lace it with a literal nuke. Anyways, his torpor has already dropped by 6k, and I kinda needed to act fast. So after Mothra made a beeline to my hive, I grabbed the 100 element, and then my heart dropped. I need fish meat. Normally this isn't a problem at all, but I kinda coded it so that fish don't spawn. I didn't even think about that. But there was one other thing that I could try. I just had to do it fast before he wakes up. So after making my way to the river, I crafted a chair and a fishing rod. I really wasn't sure if this would work because there might need to be fish in the water for me to actually catch them. You know, physics, logic, any type of reasoning, but it's also possible that they just spawn in on my line, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, it was worth a shot. Unfortunately for me though, the non-existent fish did not bite, even after 5 minutes. And you can actually get raw meat from white supply drops, but only regular and never fish. To be honest, I have no idea if any of the kaiju drop fish meat, but before I could even try that, my game crashed 3 times. And when I made it back, well, it was too late. Godzilla was gone. I had wasted 7 entire 500 times darts, and I failed to tame because of a fish. But there was one thing left that I could try if I wanted to tame this guy. Okeano's embodiment of the ocean. He's the only kaiju in the entire game that spawns in the ocean, and I'm willing to bet that while he probably doesn't drop fish meat himself, his little goldfish minions might. But before I set out to find the dude, I realized that the forges were running low on wood and on metal. So I spent the rest of day 55 on that 9 to 5 grind. And on day 56, wow, that was terrible, I decided I really wanted to tame one of those broccoli heads, but it says they're a knockout tame and it doesn't show the torpor level, which is a bit weird. Anyways, the metal was still cooking, and Cherno Alpha would be finally joining the squad in a few days. But my focus right now was cutting open one of these fishman servants to see what was inside. I would prefer him to not be level 210 because, well, there's about 1.7 million reasons, but the loyal eel servant guy only has 70k, which is acceptable. So I summoned Death Aura, who tried to get out of work by square dancing. That was amazing. But it was time to stop procrastinating and declare war on a fish. Death Aura's attacks did way less damage than normal, but the dude only has 70k, so like, how hard could this be? And the answer to that question was, it was very. Okeanos was able to damage me directly, and 10 seconds into the fight, I found myself in Chuck from Better Call Saul's worst nightmare. Luckily, I managed to back off and I ate enough honey to heal up, but I only needed a couple more hits and I wasn't ready to give up just yet. Mr. Salmon was getting super low health, but Okeanos was simultaneously plotting his revenge. And the second that Death Aura landed a haymaker using his toe, so did Okeanos. Is that the fish? And the fish was down, but so was Death Aura. No, Death Aura! Somehow, Okeanos just ended my second best friend's career. I think she was on neutral and she like ran into the water when I died or something. But once I made it back, thank God those dudes can't go on land, it was all for nothing. Because the eel servant dropped regular raw meat and raw prime meat, but no fish meat. And to make matters worse, well, my body over there is next to Hurricane Kaiju, and Grampzilla and 8 of the 500 times tranks were inside that bag. So on day 57, I had to at least try and get my stuff back. The audio kind of glitched out here, so that's why you can't hear anything right now. But my first attempt ended with me being waterboarded by a fish. But luckily I can spawn relatively close, and this time I actually did get my stuff back for about 5 seconds. But I made it far enough away where everything was safe, and after making it back yet again, I got as far away from there as possible. I managed to get everything back, but Death Aura was gone, and the fish meat for Godzilla was literally impossible to get. At least there was still the super version of Godzilla, who is a lot better, 4 million torpor. Plus there's a whole lot of other kaiju as well. But no matter what I went for, I needed more tranks. So after doing some chores around the base, it was time for phase 2 of my plan. After I got the narcotics, I could tame an army and start knocking out more kaiju off the hit list. So I took Cupcake out to the fields where she will be working for the next 36 hours, with no pay of course. When I saw Kevin's mother enter the Shadow Realm, why do I feel like I just saw something I wasn't supposed to see? Anyways, if I want to tame some sort of multi-millionaire creature, and by multi-millionaire, I mean they're top 1%ers when it comes to insomnia, I'm gonna need some more trank darts. A lot of trank darts. It was now day 59, and I had a somewhat significant amount of melatonin berries, but I was all out of disgusting meat. So I grabbed the 4,000 raw meat that I did have, transformed it via my bowels, and queued up some good night's sleep. I wanted to make sure that I had enough to actually craft all of the narcotics though. So I evicted Callisto from my residence, marking Kaiju number 20 out of 53. And after kiting away Rodon, who so desperately wanted to eat a cupcake for breakfast, I saw a beast stallion that was partying with an Akuki Rai and a Jaeger. So I crashed their party by decapitating them one by one, and I now had another 4,000 raw meat. It is kind of annoying because Kaiju typically just drop prime meat, and I'm physically incapable of placing that into my toilet. But anyways, Mothra was literally starving somehow after all her unpaid labor. So I pressed right trigger 4 times, and after some good times back at base, I was 800 metal away from the 5,000 needed to craft Cherno Alpha, but I did have enough narcotics to manufacture 8 supersized buckets of crystal melatonin, bringing my total to 14 trank darts, and like 20 more cooking up in the lab. So on day 60, I needed something decent to replace Death Aura before I could go bigger, and I had a lot of options, including Leatherback, Iguanot, Behemoth, who was a different taming method, all decent choices of course, and then there's Shimo, who I still wanted to tame, but earlier I actually kinda did it wrong. You're supposed to kill a low-level Shimo first for the taming food. Bro's a cannibal. But anyways, I found a different target, 2 actually. A Gigan and Shin Godzilla. Yeah, I'm still kinda salty about losing the Godzilla tame over a piece of fish. I wanted to find a higher level than 60 though, so I headed to the desert, saw something that looks like it belongs in Dante's Inferno. What is that? Destroya. 4 million health. Anyways, the only Shin Godzilla that I could find was a super low level. And after witnessing Super Godzilla put a Tech Gojuran into a wind tunnel, the Shin Godzilla and the Gigan that I was gonna tame both have gotten involved in the vegan lifestyle. Oh, come on, dude. Wait, why is that fish climbing a tree right now? Okay, that's a lot of heathens. I stuck around to see the result, but the broccoli seemed to prevail. I needed to find another Shin Godzilla, but over in the volcano, the one that I did find had a demon on his left shoulder and a robot on his right. There's no way I can fight Destroya, so I continued my search, where I found a 110 Gigan, and then a 95 Shin Godzilla. Oh! So I launched a bedtime story in the general direction of his eye socket. Ow, what is hitting me? What was hitting me was none other than Greg himself. I incinerated him. And by the way, I deleted Greg earlier and he was tame number 12 out of 53, but unfortunately first grade math is kind of hard, and then I said 12 again for King Kong. So I need to increase the tame count. We're now at 21 out of 53. Anyway, Shin Godzilla was waiting, so I launched a dart into the ground, apparently. The dude wouldn't stop moving right after I shoot, but eventually one of my nighttime routines made contact with his forearm, and now that he was aggroed, it ironically made it way easier. It's honestly insane how overpowered Mothra has been for this challenge, but she won't be able to help me for the boss fights or some of the more difficult tames. Anyways, Godzilla, but this time with shins, was down. Well, he was still kinda up. Bro's sleeping while standing up. But then, well, this happened. Oh, no! Why do they all do that? The east spawn point was pretty close by, but when I came back, something was a little off. A robotics major was trying to murder my cupcake. Luckily, she does have the health to survive an assault, but I needed to mount. So I waited patiently as he sent multiple rockets through Cupcake's frosting, and right in between attacks, I went for it. These dudes will literally follow you to the ends of the earth. So I was kiting him away when my game crashed, and I loaded back in with a missile directly launching at my face. Dude, I don't know if I've died more or if my game has crashed more. So the Kiryu was clearly saved right here, but when I returned, well, they were both gone, and there was another Shin Godzilla cosplaying as a worm on the ground. What is bro doing? I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I just lost the Tame, and I only have 7 darts left. There were a lot more Shin Godzillas nearby though, and this level 145 had 900k torpor, which I actually can't even afford right now. So I headed back, where I found Mr. Owl, and removed Mr. Owl from the gene pool, 25 out of 53 by the way, repaired my armor, gave Kevin's family permission to throw a pool party, made some more slumber shots, and realized I needed some meat. So I crashed Kevin's family pool party, 60k chitin, and Kevin's family had so much meat that it filled up my entire toilet. Okay, there's no way anybody on this entire planet has ever said that sentence, but apparently I'm pretty good at dropping bombs, because it only took what? To spoil 20,000 entire steaks. They better not let me near the frozen aisle. So I queued up some more narcotics in my laboratory, and with 17 slumber shots in my quiver, Shin Godzilla is gonna get some sleep tonight. This time, I just needed to make sure that I don't die from his death aura. And speaking of the death aura, on day 62, right next to the 145 Shin Godzilla, I found a level 135 Foothold. I don't know what it is about these things, but I just really like them. And they're also super easy to tame relative to their strength. So I launched 2 trank darts, which is all it took, and I put some prime meat right beneath her tongue. Okay, can we do this somewhere else? I kited the level 15 away. Kind of. But halfway through the 145 sleep therapy, his brother came back to visit. I was already super close to the knock, so I thought I could just finish the job and then kite the dude away. But what actually happened was the dude got stuck on top of his step-cousin, and there's no way that I could fight this dude, normally. But he was just standing there taking it like a man.
And he stands there, unfazed.
And it took a while, but after a whole lot of moth hands were thrown while Super Godzilla spectated, Colossalus enjoyed a hot tub experience, and Foothold was busy being incapacitated. I lodged 100 slices of raw terminant between this man's vocal cords, and just like that, Shin Godzilla was gaslit into being my friend. That's how I make all my friends. This was a huge upgrade, and Colossalus volunteered to be our test dummy. Thanks, buddy. Shin Godzilla's attacks consisted of this kick thing where he rams his toenail against the enemy, a fireball spit thing that doesn't really seem like it does that much, the ability to headbang to his favorite music, the most pathetic roar in the West, and for the grand finale, he can do this. That's doing 10,000 per tick, by the way. Shin Godzilla gets my stamp of approval, and he also marks Kaiju number 23 out of 53. What are you looking at? I decided to name him Steve, and I also figured out that Steve's ultimate attack is Shift Q on the keyboard, which puts on a laser light show. Anyway, Steve had 72 levels from killing Colossus, and this is only on 3 times XP, by the way. It's kind of insane. So I put half of the levels into his health, giving him a humble 10 million, you know, no biggie, and I put the rest into melee. But while we were waiting on Foothold to finish her supper, I threw out Grampzilla for a comparison. Wow, that's just sad. All right, Steve, you're going in the Pokeball. And 10 minutes later, Death Aura, but alive, was tamed as well. Woodalong is getting messed up right now. At this point, it was day 63, and I exterminated some pedestrians for levels before breakfast. Famutos have some pretty terrible health scaling, so it barely goes up, and since that's a little bit useless, I put all of my levels into melee, and my next goal was to use my small army to take down a Shimo so I can feed it to another one. The rest of day 63 was pretty much spent doing chores around the base, but halfway through, I realized that I finally had enough metal for Cherno Alpha. I also had a ton of NyQuil, and I needed to summon Cherno Alpha before this thing spoils. Metallica marks Tame number 24 out of 53, and I was a bit disappointed that he only came out at level 30, but either way, he was actually really solid. I was just about to do an attack showcase on this Siren head, but after he'd sung his last Siren, Rodon showed up, and he was much stronger than I had imagined. This might be a problem. That was almost really bad. Cherno Alpha survived inside the pod, but I definitely needed to heal my army before we could take on a Shimo. I made 5 more health potions. 1 for a Cupcake, 1 for a Metallica member, 1 for a man named Steve, who by the way has a 20-second spawn animation of him being birthed into the world. That was disturbing. But with the whole platoon feeling healthy again, it was finally time to take on Shimo. So I located one that was only level 10, summoned the squad, and I didn't even realize this, but the Cherno Alpha doesn't actually work if he's not controlled by me. He's not really even a tame, he's just like a robot super suit. But I was kind of worried about dying off the back of one of the tames, so I stayed on a Cupcake, and it looks like we've got a 2v1 on our hands. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hypothermia Land. I think if it was just Death Aura, she'd be in the afterlife right now, but Steve is an absolute unit. And speaking of Steve, he was now in possession of a Shimo crystal. It was pretty easy to find a higher level near the edges of the map, because their health bars render in from across the universe. And this level 127, which by the way, I have no idea why the Shimo don't spawn in multiples of 5 like everything else. But anyways, he was in the swamp for some reason. And this time I was being extra careful, because I know what'll happen if he uses that ice attack, but I was going a bit too high, and the Spyglass wasn't even working. I kind of wasted 3 perfectly good NyQuil darts before I realized that he was out of range for the long knife. But once I came back and inside the range, jeez, that torpor drops fast. I started shoot, and it was actually perfect, because I was far enough to still reach him, but too far to aggro me. And a few bedtime stories later, his sleep deprivation was no longer an issue. This man has 1.7 million health, and simply being in his presence sends a chill down my spine and my stomach. Anyways, I fed him the crystal that came from his best friend, but bro was not eating. I also became a professional eater myself, as I downed 5 entire jars of honey every 10 seconds, until I finally realized that Cupcake's healing was actually keeping me full health even through the hunger and through the frostbite. But every 5 seconds or so, I would have to shoot an entire 500 times trank dart just to keep this dude from going woke. I was eating through narcotics like an addict. And at one point, the dude stood up in his sleep and then sat on me. Yo, I seem to be stuck. His hunger was dropping kinda slow, and to be honest, I wasn't sure if the dude was gonna even eat the crystal at all. It took a while, and I ended up using over 20 trank darts on this guy for a total of 10,000 narcotics invested. This is one of the most severe cases of insomnia I've ever recorded. But we did it. Shimo's brain has been washed, marking Kaiju number 25 out of 53. For some reason, even after the tame, he still causes me to freeze and starve to death. And it's impossible to swim because bro freezes the water beneath his feet just to walk on top of the ocean. Okay, I can't lie, that's kind of cool. And his first attack was a bite, his second was a slash, and he can do, that. He also has beef with the floor, and he's a laser tag connoisseur. Bars. And when you press O, he starts picking his nose. So I decided to name him Frostbite, and after refilling my parachute supply, It was time to put Frostbite to the test. Come here, boy. Frostbite was a menace to frozen society, and I was pretty impressed. Minus the fact that he actively tries to kill me, of course. So after my daily game crash, thanks to Shimo draining my entire supply of hardcore drugs, I spent the entire day 66 farming some more berries and doing some chores around base. And on day 67, I spent the morning continuing the grind. I then casually body slammed some of my neighbors so I could spoil their meat in my toilet. And at one point, I had a very devilish encounter, and the dude sent all his followers, actual heathens, at my ankles. But anyways, after some more berries, I noticed a level 70 Gigan near my cave. But I didn't have any tranks on me, so I headed back to base, did some sprints to prepare for my appointment with the toilet. What was that? Spoiled thy meat. And I had enough narcotics at this point for 24 of the 500 times horse tranquilizers. And the fact that that's still not enough for Super Godzilla is kinda wild. I was actually planning to become Dexter and mass exterminate like every single kaiju that has less than 1,000,000 health. But I wanted to make sure my army was strong enough first, and that's where Mr. Gigan comes in. But when I left my base, well, someone followed me home. Oh, this man spawned in an entire mafia of flaming RG looking dudes, but luckily Mothra was a volunteer firefighter, so she put out some flames, and I was just gonna leave because bro has 2.4 million health, but then I saw something. I wasn't the only one making deals with the devil. This Gojuran was a brave soldier, and I decided to stick around and see what happens. The fight did kinda start off pretty bad for the little fella. To be honest, the participants actually didn't look like they were doing anything too crazy, and I decided I want to enlist. So I witnessed Shin Godzilla being birthed into this world, and while that was happening, the Gojuran had fully charged his atomic breath. That's the race car sounding thing, by the way. And Lucifer was now at half health. I was still planning on joining, but somehow I didn't have parachutes anymore. I have no idea how that happened. And Shimo was so obese that I couldn't get around his hitbox to mount Mothra. Every time I tried, I just kept remounting the iceberg fella. And when I tried again, well, everything came crashing down. At this point, I don't even have any reaction to that. When I loaded myself back into the simulation, the aftermath of war was nearby, but one of our fierce competitors had gone missing. Lucifer was by himself, and I guess it's time for me to check in. So I summoned Frostbite and a man named Steve, and before I could even make it there, a skullcrawler was being spit roasted on an open fire, and Behemoth himself tried to flank Frostbite while I was distracted. The entire fight ended up becoming a world war between prehistoric nations, but I did have Mothra for support, and I was confident that I would come out on top. The manifestation of my intrusive thoughts has deceased, marking Kaiju number 26 out of 53. Apparently Steve has beef with that tree over there, and the behemoth that tried to flank us at the start of the fight marks Kaiju number 27 out of 53. But Steve proved himself worthy of life, and Death Aura over there is avoiding conflict. You could have helped or something. So on day 68, after investigating a crime scene, covering up a crime scene, I noticed that Lucifer dropped an Alpha Greg head. Wow, he really is evil. A few minutes later, my daily game crash decided to pay me a visit, but I made my way through the tropical islands and into the desert, where I found a high-level Gigan. But he was beefing with a 150 tech Gojuran. That man's gonna die. So I searched for a while, but I couldn't really find anything better. So I came back to this level 65, who is now holding hands with Super Godzilla. Can you give us a minute, dude? He only has 360k torpor, which is just 3 trank darts. So I lodged 2 of them things into his shoulder blade. Bro tried to run for his mother. Get back here, young man. But I couldn't let him escape from getting a good night's sleep. And after one more high-quality bedtime story, he was out. Super Godzilla, and now Steve's cousin-in-law, both had intentions to harvest my kidneys, so I decided to lead them over to the beach in hopes that they'd go on vacation or something. And it did work on Super Godzilla, who ended up getting stuck behind that archway thing, but Steve's cousin-in-law was still after me. I had to act fast, but as I dismounted, well, I forgot about the Death Aura. Oh no! Somehow, I made made it out on like 10 health. But Steve's cousin-in-law would not leave me alone. He was a super low level though, so I decided to just incapacitate that man. And now I could have some private time with Edward's sword hands over here. I tried using Mothra to avoid the death aura, but I almost got impaled again. So this time I hovered a bit, which actually worked. But while he was eating his evening snack, I wasn't able to mount Cupcake. And I kinda don't have any parachutes. I lost my kneecaps that day. Anyways, after respawning inside a nuclear testing site, I spawned a bit closer this time. Hello, sir. And after experiencing the wrath of Kevin's mother, Mothra, help! The simulation crashed. Yeah, sometimes, most of the time, I hate this game. Still my favorite game, but I also hate it. The Gigan had now despawned. Because of the spawn system I coded, like, resets every time I boot up game. So all of that was for literally nothing. And the Gigan isn't really that great anyways. So on day 69, I decided to shift my focus. I only have about 30 days remaining to build an army. And there was one Tame I knew that I had to get. King Ghidorah is spawned in using this crystal, which requires cutting off 15 of Godzilla's dorsal fins, along with a lifetime supply of crystal, metal, stone, and element. Dude, I'm so glad I don't have to cook the metal. On the other hand, Super Godzilla's emerald looking thing that he eats for breakfast every morning requires similar resources. So after doing some chores around the cave, which by the way, the narcotics are still crafting, and I should probably make a second chem bench at some point to speed that up, but we were up to 33 trank darts, which is like half of what I need for Doug. Anyways, I set back out and then realized that I forgot to do the one thing that I went back to base for in the first place. Oh, I forgot the parachutes. But while I was cooking up some parachutes inside my kitchen, I noticed Kevin's mother staring at me through my backyard window. I was hoping that she was just the DoorDash driver, but unfortunately, she was the DoorDash assassin. I tried to take cover from her organic rockets, but in the end, I perished. And when I reincarnated inside my garage, Kevin's siblings were already taking over my house. Y'all were not in the will. Some of them were literally inside. But luckily, she like fell into the water or something, and Kevin's siblings decided to not assassinate me anymore. So after committing mass Kevincide, I wasn't able to get my body back because the corpse of Kevin's sister was blocking my kitchen doorway. Do I seriously have to do this with my fizz? That took 5 minutes. And at this point, it was day 70. So I spoiled Kevin's family and turned them into bedtime stories. But with the parachutes crafted, I could finally continue the plan. It's about to get super grindy, but I'll do whatever it takes to get King Ghidorah, Super Godzilla, and Doug for the final boss fight. But the Kaiju counter was only at 27 out of 53, and there's only 30 days left. So after launching my nighttime routine into the kidney of Edward Katana Hands, enjoying the laser light show, and chasing him down, gunning him down in the street, Bro's jaw was wide open. He wanted that primate. And I obliged. And 10 minutes later, Edward's sword hands was tamed, marking Kaiju number 28 out of 53. And it was time for the real reason why I was even out here. Before I could focus on the big stuff, I really needed to get the easy ones knocked out, and maybe farm some of the Godzilla's dorsal fins while I'm at it. So it was time for a triple M. What is a triple M, you might ask? Mass murder montage. A giant garbage can. 29 out of 53. Ragnarona, the black-blooded cretin. 30 out of 53. Mr. Iguanot. 31 out of 53. Godzilla himself. 32 out of 53. The Pacific Rim Degenerate, 33 out of 53. A robotics major. Imagine dying to a boomer. 34 out of 53. This psychopath. 35 out of 53. Typhoon and his Squidward tentacles. 36 out of 53. Peter McGriffin. 37 out of 53. Faust, the fraudulent titan. 38 out of 53. Zenonia, nuisance of the hive. 39 out of 53. The Netflix star, Mr. Demogorgon. 40 out of 53. Charizard, but with wings. 41 out of 53. A crawling skull. 42 out of 53. A giant broccoli and her army of flying vegans. 43 out of 53. 43 out of 53. That's how many kaiju I've murdered. Frostbite had earned a healing potion, and I also realized that I haven't even leveled the dude up yet. But while I was focused on his health, well, his hypothermia aura deteriorated mine. Good times. Anyways, I actually got a bunch of crops from the cult of broccoli lovers, but with only 20 days remaining and 10 kaiju left, including Super Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Woodalong, Okeanos, Gojiran, Titan, and of course, Doug, I really needed to pick up the pace. But luckily, enough time has passed for a pharmaceutical amount of drugs to be manufactured. And I have enough to tame most things. But some kaiju have 10 billion torpor, like this Gojiran and this Titan. They require more creative methods of taming. He's tired of the world's shenanigans at this point. Me too, man. But I am gonna have to physically assault you later. Anyways, this might sound kind of crazy, but with 79 high-quality bedtime stories, I was thinking about reading them to brainwash Doug. Or maybe a Super Godzilla. Both were risky, and last time I played with kaiju mods, I did have Doug, and he's, how do you put this? He's 100% balanced and definitely not overpowered at all. He removed my existence like 15 times. But anyways, I have a cupcake now, and even though he's strong, there's no way he'll one-shot my 1.4 million health, right? But before I could do that, I found a Godzilla that majored robotics in college. This guy didn't look too crazy, so I let Steve birth into this world while the robotics major put a mere mortal into his spin cycle. And then bro started doing laser hair removal, so I walked over, kicked him in the booty, hit multiple haymakers using my head, started spit roasting the dude, and then when I comboed that man down to 300k health, well, my game crashed. Twice. I think it's time to reset the spawns again. Okay, so watch how fast they spawn back here. On day 79, Doug was chilling in the desert. I thought that he was alone, but okay. This Mecha Godzilla fella had 900,000 health, and Doug completely dismembered him in less than 5 seconds. Okay, well that was terrifying. So I kited Super Godzilla behind a rock. That's a highly intelligent specimen right there. But with Cupcake by my side and 79 nighttime routines on my schedule, I was as prepared as I was gonna get. And taming Doug is definitely easier than executing him. Also, Super Godzilla came back, and the dude almost made me want to quit living. But surprisingly, Doug is built like a bag of milk, and bro is physically incapable of targeting anything above his head. Doug being severely out of shape makes things a lot easier, but Super Godzilla makes things a lot more infuriating. Will you go away? And it took a while. But after a world record dose of melatonin, Doug had lost his consciousness, and after kiting this troglodyte to the Rocky Mountains, I placed 100 prime meat directly into Doug's oversized esophagus, and then this happened. Oh! You have no idea how much I hate this man right now. I was shooting Tranks for a solid 15 minutes straight while he chased me around like a stalker. To be honest, I might tame him and then drown him. Anyways, about 10 minutes later, as day 79 was coming to an end, Doug himself was domesticated, marking Kaiju number 44 out of 53. But this buffoon won't let me cryo him, so I kited him into the ocean, put Doug inside a Pokeball, and watched as his lungs filled with water. I was actually just gonna stand here and cheer him on as he drowned, but the dude made it out alive, unfortunately. So on day 80, it was time to put Doug to the test. He had 33 million health, well it's 40 now. Doug was a powerful fella. His basic bite does like 50,000 damage. He has the most powerful belly flop of all time for a humble 150,000 damage, and he has this laser thing that does 8,000 hair removal per tick. I'm so glad he didn't hit Mothra with that. But there was one other thing that Doug was capable of, and Typhoon over here has volunteered as our test dummy. that was kind of mid. I think the 50 million health is probably enough when he can just do that. Although, I don't know how much health the bosses actually have. So I put all of the levels into melee to hopefully kill them as fast as possible. But to be honest, Doug is 100% balanced and not broken at all, because his strength is balanced out by having to look like that. That was the actual game, by the way. I didn't do that. Doug can just scream, apparently. Anyways, after I hired Mothra to exterminate some home invaders, I spoiled 15,000 raw meat with a single bowel movement, made 12 more trank darts, and repaired my long neck. There were 9 kaiju left on my list, and 2 to 3 of them I wanted to tame, because these 3 boss spawners right here, I've never actually seen before, and I have no idea how much firepower I'm gonna need for that fight. And by the way, I haven't seen it, but the Ingram says epilepsy warning. I'm not gonna fight him until day 100, and I'll mention it again, but just a heads up so you guys know. Anyways, there were a few things left to take out, and on day 81 I lost the battle to ARK's netcode 2 times in a row. But once I was allowed to play the game, I came across a level 10 Godzilla who only had 500k health. So Doug belly flopped his way into this world, crawled over, and nuked Godzilla's entire family, his family of 1. Doug, what have you been eating? I just ripped that man's dorsal fin straight out of his spinal cord. Excuse me, sir, what do you think you're doing? Doug was a tad bit overpowered, just a tad bit, and that is probably necessary for the boss. But for the 9 remaining tames, I'll try and use other stuff sometimes just to make it a bit more fair. Anyways, I now need 13 more dorsal fins for Ghidorah, and I began to search for the 9 remaining kaiju survivors. It wasn't long before I came across Gojoran, the NASCAR driver, so I summoned Steve, swatted a couple flies named Greg, and summoned Steve's frostbitten colleague. The fight had already commenced, but I was too busy being stuck inside of Frostbite's ankle to notice. I kind of thought he would, move, and I wasn't really expecting Steve to have any issues considering he has 10 million health and Mr. Gojoran only has 500k. But I couldn't have been more wrong. When I finally decided to mount Frostbite, I noticed that Steve was down bad. Gojoran was low too, but it was gonna be super close. And if I didn't act fast, I might lose my man Steve. So I tried to summon Doug with the goal of mounting him on the way down, but he was too fat to fit. No! Obesity has ruined my life yet again. And on the way back over, I was super nervous. But luckily, the Gojoran was dead on arrival, and Steve was already healing from Mothra. Oh, is that what almost killed him? The Gojoran was absolutely insane. I think he did about the same damage as Doug somehow. But anyways, he marks kaiju number 45 out of 53. And after my daily game crash, I found a kite, the White Death. This fight wasn't too exciting, to be honest, and basically I summoned the entire squad, tried to get them to attack, but kaiju were so large that half of the time they're outside of whistle distance. And long story short, everyone pretty much just stood there and watched as Steve here went into battle by himself, and then he stood still too for 2 entire minutes. Why are you not attacking, bro? I tried whistling attack target, I tried putting him on neutral, and I also had Famuto and Frostbite on neutral and following me, but none of the dudes were doing anything. Is this a psyop to get Steve beheaded? This man's health was getting dangerously low, and the Titan should have been dead already. So I summoned Doug, and after his morning belly flop, we finished the job. Titan and his white colored death mark kaiju number 46 out of 53. And on the way back to base, I summoned Doug to use his laser to harvest Godzilla's kidneys. I mean dorsal fin. And I tried to suffocate another one via belly flop, but bro was versed in quantum physics and teleported to the Shadow Realm. Anyways, after I made some more health potions at base, it was time to head over to Hypothermia Land and fight someone strong. Her name is Wudalong, aka the Apocalyptic Dragon. Y'all better actually attack this time. And just like that, Wudalong was down, and the apocalypse is no more. Thanks for the help, guys. She marks kaiju number 47 out of 53. And back at my humble abode, it was now day 83, and somehow Behemoth had broken into my house, so I paid a freelancer named Cupcake to bleed his health down below 20%, which unlocks the ability to tame this guy. And, I mean, why not? So I launched a best-selling bedtime story directly into his cheekbone, and then he incinerated me. Okay, really? When I retried at life, Cupcake had already finished the job, but I kinda got incinerated again. Anyways, Woodalong dropped 4 entire autobiographies. And I'm sorry, bro, but I'm not reading all that. I did need these, however, to summon the Chitin Prime boss. And the Broccoli boss requires some other stuff, which I already had here as well. But even though I had the stuff, we're not gonna spawn them just yet, because I still needed to tame Super Godzilla using this crystal, and King Ghidorah using this crystal. Meaning, I need a total of 6,000 crystal, 600 element, 5,500 metal, and 5,000 stone. And 15 of Godzilla's dorsal fins, of course. I already had like half of the stuff, but I also needed more tranks for Super Godzilla's insane levels of sleep deprivation. I only had 18 days left though, and it was time to grind.
I do it again.
Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up, I'm just doing me, everything is on me, oh you matter what, add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up, I'm just doing me, everything is on me, oh you matter what, add it up, told it if it's all me, everything is
It
on
was
me,
now
don't
day 87, and I still don't have a roof over my greenhouse. So much for that. But Mothra's inventory was absolutely loaded, and it took me like 10 minutes just to transport everything downstairs. But I now had enough hardcore narcotics to cook up 37 nighttime routines for Super Godzilla. And over in the fabricator, I had enough resources to make a crystal for Godzilla and everything for Ghidorah, minus Godzilla's dorsals. So I set out to find this supercharged version of Steve, but instead I spotted his robot superior, Mecha Godzilla. The dude would already be checked off my list if my game didn't crash earlier, but it did. So I called up one of my buddies named Doug, watched as he gunned down an android in the streets. Mecha Godzilla marks Kaiju number 48 out of 53. And King Kong just got slumped by Gojira over there. But on day 88, I found a level 100. The dude was like stuck on top of Kiryu. I don't even want to know what they were doing to get into that position. But after what he tried to do to me while he was taming Doug, he deserves it. This was the easiest knock of all time. 30 sleeping pills later, Super Godzilla was down, and so was Kiryu. I shoved some crystal directly into his trachea, which instantly tamed the dude, marking Kaiju number 49 out of 53. But then, Mecha Godzilla tried to get his revenge. Super Godzilla was kind of insane, and besides Doug, he was the best creature that I've found yet. Most of his attacks did well over 10,000 damage, and the big giant slam thing where he plays Ring Around the Rosie and then uppercuts a dude's robot jaw did over 100 hits. Overall, I'm pretty impressed, but the best part has yet to come. Just watch this.
I got my hands on your body, so tell me what you want me to do. I can be good or be naughty.
That was amazing. Anyways, after the levels, he had around 15 million health and some pretty decent combat skills, and executed his brother-in-law for a dorsal fin. I really wish I could have tamed one of the regular ones and evolved him, but since there's no fish, I guess Carl's the best we've got. But anyways, it was now day 89, and I reevaluated the list. There were exactly 4 base Kaiju remaining: Okeanos, Tech Gojiran, Destroya, and King Ghidorah himself. But I also had to take down the final bosses on day 100, but the Tech Gojiran was already rendered in from across the tri-state area. We've already seen this guy before. He's basically just a tech version of the normal Gojiran. The dude does some serious damage, but so do I. The Tech Gojiran marks Kaiju number 50 out of 53. And after belly flopping a peasant to steal his dorsal fin, he just did a million with a belly flop. I was on the hunt for a fishman. I actually set where Okeanos can spawn inside these snow water bubbles because I thought it would be funny, but I don't think it's working because I don't see it. Even the dudes under the water over here aren't fish. But on day 90, after not catching any fish in tropics, why hello, sir. Thank you for your donation. I found Okeanos hiding out over in the redwoods. The dude's a bit stronger, so I don't want to just eviscerate him with a lizard man named Doug, and instead I called upon Carl to go fishing the old-fashioned way. I was really worried that they'd kill me off the bat, but instead he just started trash talking me. fools. Even outside the ocean, it still answers my call. Bro, you're a fish. Calm down. He was definitely doing more damage to me than I was to him. I think he takes less than other stuff, but I also had way more health than him, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was taking forever though, and at one point I just started riding on top of him like one of those mechanical bulls at the carnival. So I kept swinging on a school of fish for a solid 10 minutes, and his health was still at 1.5 million. It was pretty obvious that I was gonna win this, but it was gonna take a long time. So I decided to speed up the process and give our aquatic friend here some laser hair removal. He survived that? Okeanos is the first mortal ever to survive Doug. Well, almost. But he marks Kaiju number 51 out of 53. And even though he's untamable, bro laid an egg. Okay, I'm not even gonna lie, a tamed version of that would be pretty cool. It did seem kind of pointless though, since the bosses won't be in the water. Maybe, I don't know, if I have time, I'll hatch him. Because it was now day 91, and I was on a road trip to pay a visit to an old friend from back in the desert. He goes by the name of Destroya, and it's one of the strongest bosses on this entire map. And this time, we're not using Doug. And just like that, Destroya had fallen. Carl sucker punched that man's corpse. And that marks Kaiju number 52 out of 53. We're in the final stretch. And the only Kaiju left on our list was King Ghidorah. I kind of wanted to tame him for the final boss fight. And I don't know what he's going to do with him, but he wants 9 more of Godzilla's dorsal fins. So I queued up 20 more narcotics in the lab. And it was time to go steal those dorsal fins. And a lizard man named Doug was going to help me do it. And once I located my first victim, I crip walked over, used the power of obesity, and Doug's beer gut did so much damage that bro became one with the earth. But the dorsal fin was secure, and I still needed 8 more. It took 4 entire days to hunt down the rest of his family members, but after some lizard-related activities, I think Doug ate too much Taco Bell. All 9 dorsal fins have been secured. So on day 96, when I arrived at my honey cave full of error messages, I threw all of my belongings onto the kitchen floor because they're too heavy to just grab out of the drug lab. But if I throw them all onto my kitchen floor first, I can grab them all at once by pressing X because of logic. But everything was ready. And after one more press of the right trigger, Ghidorah was ready to spawn. So I made the rest of those narcotics into some trank darts, and I spent half of the day wasting time and over preparing. But on day 97, everything was ready as it's gonna get. And after having a meetup with Mothra's estranged cousin, hey, how's it going, dude? I was really hoping that Ghidorah would have less than 6 million torpor, because I didn't have enough darts for more than that. But we were about to find out. The area right outside the redwoods was flat enough, so I summoned Doug to do some landscaping. That man got KO'd. Nice teeth, bro. But after Doug cleaned up the streets in our neighborhood, I consumed a crystal. And the king himself came flying down from the heavens. That man's kind of scary, I'm not gonna lie. The only reason that Doug wasn't in his Pokeball right now was just in case something went wrong. But, well, Ghidorah wasn't flying because he was distracted on Doug. This was a complete accident, but it was working extremely well. The dude almost one-shot a Cupcake when he did the ginormous lightning thing that smited every mortal within a 5-mile radius. But even though Ghidorah's damage was kind of insane, Doug's health was even crazier. And over the course of 50 lullabies being directly implanted into that man's third head, Doug had only lost about 2 million health, and it wasn't long before the king was dethroned. So I borrowed some of Doug's most prime slices of meat, shoved them down all 3 of Ghidorah's esophagus, and the dude had 9.4 million health before the Tame, and I'm just now noticing, but bro is level 750? That's illegal. But roughly 20 minutes later, the mighty Ghidorah has been tamed, and all 53 out of 53 Kaiju have been defeated or brainwashed. The challenge has been completed, but there were still the bosses, and it was time to test out what Ghidorah could do. For whatever reason, he's not actually able to attack while flying, which is a bit unfortunate, but when I drafted him into the military, he had a few basic attacks for more damage than even Super Godzilla. But there were 2 highlights to his arsenal. The laser light show, where he can juggle 3 lasers at the same time, and this. 43k per tick. He's basically just Doug, but with wings, and slightly less overpowered. But anyways, I had my recording paused like a professional YouTuber, but I leveled his health to 25 million, and I healed him with one of the health potions. Mr. Ghidorah deserved a name fit for the king that he is, but I couldn't think of anything, so I named him Bob. I spent most of day 98 just making sure that everything was ready and getting everybody healed up. And on day 99, it was time to craft the boss spawn. So I went to the library, checked out everything they had in the lore department. And I'm not sure how you get those plague things for this other one, but it seems like a work in progress or something anyways. It doesn't have a description. But Chitin in his prime and the boomer version of Broccoli required evolved Kaiju cells. So I had to sit here and stare at the pixels moving from left to right on my screen 100 times in a row, repeated the process to turn active into enhanced, and repeated the process once again to turn enhanced into evolve. I was not expecting this to take so long. It was now day 100, and both summoners were ready to cook. And this is where I mentioned that these bosses have an epilepsy warning, because the only damage the bosses should be doing is to me virtually and not to you in real life through that screen. I genuinely don't know what to expect with these guys though, and the spoil timer was only 15 minutes. I didn't have much time, and since Doug was so overpowered, well, if it lets me, I'm gonna spawn them both in at the same time. After 100 entire days, I've managed to either brutally murder or successfully gaslight into being my friend 53 different species of kaiju. But this retirement age Broccoli was a whole nother beast, and it was time for one last fight. And just like that, Doug and the boomer version of Broccoli had both reigned victorious over my PC. I see why there's an epilepsy warning. But they should have warned me that every time Doug attacked, it would harvest over 2 million resources from the Broccoli's robotic goons, which caused my PC to drop to 0.01 FPS, by the way. I guess the crash at the end is kind of poetic though, considering it happened more than 100 times during that playthrough. The elder guy's health was getting really low, and I think it was pretty obvious that Doug would have won, but his resourcing would have needed to be disabled. If you guys enjoyed this challenge, all I ask is you please leave a like for my suffering, and let me know if you prefer Ark Survival Evolved or Ark Ascended in the comments. I have some really big things planned, so make sure you're subscribed to see that. And remember kids, always eat your broccoli. Don't forget to download Raid Shadow Legends using the QR code on screen or the link in the description below. And if you want to see a 100 days with random dino sizes and dino stats, click right here.